6 at 7 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you all for attending tonight. The school committee has a statement we would like to share with everybody. To the Douglas community, district staff, and students, during the last public comment portion of the last school committee meeting, an individual shared his opinion on a number of topics. Many of these statements cause hurt, frustration within our district. Members of the community have also expressed anger at the school committee for not have expressed anger with the school committee that did not stop the speaker or respond to him. The school committee also felt that the person's remark contradicted the Douglas Public Schools' mission to offer diverse learning experiences that meet the academic, social, physical, and emotional needs of all the students. We feel that it is important to clarify the purpose of public comment portion of any school committee meeting, and the Attorney General's office strongly recommends that all public bodies allow for public comment at some point during their meetings. This provides the public the ability to speak on a particular agenda item or anything under the jurisdiction of a public body. As a rule, public bodies do not respond to comments as it would result in a violation of open meeting laws. Allowing committee members to engage in deliberation or debate over topics not on the agenda. Public comment is voicing of opinions on matters under the authority of the school committee. And it is not intended to be a form of conversation between the public and the school committee. However, we want to affirm the statements made on September 15th, especially those that cause any hurt amongst the LGBTQ community, do not represent the inclusion of school culture that our district and its employees work so diligently to foster. The school committee is working to update existing policy to clarify and better understanding of open meeting laws for both public and school committees itself. At this time, we recognize by allowing the public to speak, there will always be potential for someone's message to remain within the legal limits while imposing the Douglas Public Schools commitment to all of its students. Rather than eliminating the public comment portion of our agenda, we encourage all of the voices to be heard, especially those that seek to build the safe, supportive, and challenging learning environment that the district strives to achieve. We're going to open it up now for public comment. Please note that it's 20 minutes. If you wish to come forth, please state your name, your address. We would like to open it up first to the students because it's wonderful to have you here tonight. We truly believe in you are building the future of our community, and we totally support you. You're only going to have 3 minutes to speak. If you get to 2 minutes and 30 seconds, Ms. Jartek is going to wave the hands to let you know that you have 30 seconds left. You have to form it in a type of a question to us, so please make sure that you're there. Otherwise, I have to stop you from talking, and I don't want to do that. I want to hear from you all. Without further ado, would anybody want to, students first please, come to and talk to the school committee?
Hi, my name is Emily Dower. I live at 486 Martello Road in Franklin, Massachusetts. I am a teacher here at Douglas High School. I'm also the advisor to the Douglas High School Gender Sexuality Alliance. So Douglas High School GSA members have come to make a public comment about the school climate here at DHS, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak.
Hello, my name is Chloe McDonald. I live on 17 Depot Street. I'm also a member of the Douglas High School and the Douglas High School Gender Sexuality Alliance. I'm here to comment on the current lack of support for LGBTQIA students in the Douglas High School and the larger Douglas community. Douglas High School students participated through glisten.org in a statewide survey relating to school climate for LGBTQ students. The 2019 school climate for LGBTQ students in Massachusetts, including the District of Douglas, reports that 86% of LGBT students report regularly hearing gay used in a negative way at school. I have personally witnessed this in school and have heard even more damaging homophobic slurs. 74% of LGBT students report regularly hearing negative remarks about gender expression at school, and 64 of LGBT students report regularly hearing negative remarks about transgender people at school. I have personally witnessed non-binary and transgender students have their gender identity disregarded by students and staff. I've heard students inciting violence against trans kids and endorsing bullying against them. I've witnessed these acts as recently as today. These are just some statistics that underscore the lack of support for LGBT students at the Douglas High School.
Hello, my name is Anthony DeMeo. I live at 15 Linden Street, Douglas, Massachusetts. I am a member of Douglas High School and a member of the Douglas High School Gender Sexuality Alliance. I am here to comment on the current lack of support for LGBTQIA students in the Douglas High School and the larger Douglas community. Douglas High School students participated through glisten.org in a statewide survey relating to school climate for LGBTQ students. The 2019 school climate for LGBTQ students in Massachusetts, including the District of Douglas, reports that only 28% of students reported attending a school with a comprehensive anti-bullying/harassment policy that included specific protections based on a sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. Fewer than 1 in 4, 23%, had a policy or official guideline to support transgender and non-binary students. My experience in DHS has showed me that we lack a comprehensive anti-bullying/harassment policy that has clear and defined guidelines to support transgender and non-binary students against these assaults. 67% of LGBTQ students reported that their school administration was somewhat or very supportive of LGBTQ students. This needs to be 100%. Anything less is unacceptable. As students, we have standards of excellence expected of us, and we expect the same from the school committee and administration. Under a third, 31% of LGBT students report that they were taught positive representation of LGBTQ people, history, or events. I have never personally been taught positive representations of LGBTQ people, history, or events in my high school career, and I am a senior. These are some of the statistics that underscores the lack of support for LGBTQ students at Douglas High School.
Hello, my name is Finn Mitchell. My address is 135 Southeast Main Street. I am a student at the high school and a member of the Douglas community as a whole. I am here on behalf of the Gender Sexuality Alliance and the LGBTQIA+ students and adults within our school. I want to speak about the current and continuous lack of support for LGBT people within our school system and community. Not just recently, but longer than I have even been a student. The bullying within our schools does not happen infrequently, and the bullying is not small. The remarks and threats are also not only witnessed or spoken by the students alone. Almost daily I hear the new drama from firsthand from friends or about homophobic and or transphobic remarks in the hall. After an LGBT presentation that was put on by a friend of mine, students said that if we allowed gay marriage, we'd have to start allowing marriage between humans and animals next. It happened in front of a teacher who said nothing about it and even participated in the following conversation criticizing our GSA. I have heard both the students and teachers use slurs like the F slur or the D slur. A friend of mine heard someone say they wished America was like some other countries that still have the death penalty for gay people. I got quiet in the classes where I felt uncomfortable with the teachers, and I spent my time in the hallways listening to homophobic remarks and noting who to avoid instead of talking with my friends. Not only is my mental health affected by this, but also my education, which I put second because it often seems to be prioritized. A teacher asked me if I was all right today and told me how tired and upset I looked. All I could think about was the stress I've been feeling all year. Honestly, these past 4 years, I am tired and I am upset, not only because of having to hear these things, but also having to deal with them. I stand here today because I need to, but I shouldn't have to. I have driver's ed, and I have homework and clubs that I am a part of, and I have things I should be focusing on as a teenager, focusing on colleges and good grades. Just because I am an LGBT student should not mean that I have to spend my high school career fighting for basic human rights and safeties, as I and my friends have. My straight peers have not had to miss out on a good amount of their high school experiences, just like we have. All we want is for you to listen and respect us. We need to be taught acceptance at all levels within the district, including the primary and elementary schools. We are your friends. We are your family, your students, and your children. We are human beings. Please be an ally. Thank you for your time.
So I just wanted to include a couple of things. So again, Emily Dower. From the same survey that these Douglas High School students had participated through glisten.org, Massachusetts schools, including Douglas, are not safe for most lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer secondary school students. In addition, many LGBTQ students in Douglas did not have access to important school resources, such as LGBTQ inclusive curriculum, and were not protected by supportive and inclusive school policies. LGBT students have lower attendance rates because of the unsafe environment at school and the dread of coming into school and facing bullying. Many of the statistics are underreported because LGBT students do not feel safe enough to fully express themselves due to the toxic school climate. Douglas High School's mission statement promises to offer diverse learning needs that meet the academic, social, physical, and emotional needs of all students. Are their social and emotional needs being met? No. As a teacher, I can say Douglas High School is struggling to meet this promise. Douglas High School's mission statement promises to provide a safe, supportive, and challenging learning environment where students can achieve academic success and personal growth. Is their learning environment safe and supportive? No. Again, as a teacher, I can say Douglas High School is struggling to meet this promise. Please, I urge you, make the decisions that are in the best interest of our students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak?
My name is John Wagenheim. I live at 160 Hattie Ave in Cumberland, Rhode Island, and I am a teacher here at the high school. Tonight, I am going to speak to the mission statement, specifically the piece that talks about meeting the social and emotional needs of our students. Moliere said of leaders, "It is not only what we do, but also what we do not do, for which we are accountable." Originally tonight, I was going to speak about what has transpired over these past few weeks, or in other ways, the lack of what has transpired, the lack of action, the lack of public response. 3 weeks is simply too long to wait. However, rather than harping on these negatives, I'm going to use the rest of my time to focus on the positive. There are some wonderful things that have happened over these past few weeks that show the support for the social, emotional needs of our students. Look around the room tonight and you will see positive action. The room is full of teachers that are here to offer their support for the students. I cannot say enough good things about the colleagues I work with and how much they care about every single student. It is wonderful to see so many students in attendance tonight. Abusive and defamatory comments have been made towards members of our student body. These students have been nothing but courageous, respectful, and thoughtful, and I feel proud and lucky to teach and interact with these students on a daily basis, no matter their race, color, sex, gender identity, religion, national origin, or sexual orientation. All I see is a bunch of wonderful young adults. Finally, I am very excited for this final piece. The school committee policy states the school committee believes that the district is an integral part of the community and that the community support is necessary for the district's operation and achievement of excellence. While the past few weeks have been a negative experience for a lot of students, many people have come together to try to turn this into a positive experience. The DTA organized a fundraiser in which the community, alumni, and teachers have come together to make a sizable donation to the National GSA organization. The students of the GSA, as well as the rest of the student body, need to know that an overwhelming majority of the community supports them, loves them, and cares for them. That's why I am so excited to say that these people came together to raise over $3,000 for the National GSA. Had it not been for some of these previous events, we may not have had such an opportunity to raise this money. We have so much more work to do as a community to support all of our students, and I look forward to being a part of this process.
Anyone else? Is there anyone online?
I want to speak to something as to why I was late, actually, and it's an ongoing problem, and it's not just in this particular, I feel that teachers, staff, and everybody in this school, when a child comes home, because this is why I was late, my child's not going to be happy for me sharing this. When a child comes home feeling that they're inadequate, and they're nobody, and they're worthless, and they have no value to a team, it's very upsetting to me that we hire people that should be here to support kids no matter what. When you see a kid doesn't look right or feel right or is upset, staff in this school and the people that we hire should check in with kids, especially when you're excluding them. And that's what I have to say tonight, because there's a lot more I have to say, because I'm just really upset right now about something that happened. So I think we need to do a better job as a community supporting each other no matter what. That's it.
Anybody else? Okay, we're going to close public comment and move on. There's nothing for new business, but old business, but under new business. Going forward, we're going to see on our agenda that we post, you'll see our mission statement will be highlighted at the top of the agenda. And in addition, as school committees, we will start in reading the mission statement at the start of each meeting to make sure, as a reminder for everybody, of what our values and beliefs are for the district and the community as well. If any of the school committee members would wish to comment further, this is your opportunity.
Well, I think I've been here the longest in this, having students come through this school particularly. And although we've come a long way, we are nowhere near 100%. Work still needs to be done, and they should only be worrying about driver's ed and their test tomorrow and everything else. We shouldn't even have to be coming in here to do this. But I appreciate that you did. Proud of you all. You did a great job, and we'll listen to you whenever you want to come in and talk.
Anyone else?
I echo that, and I'm also proud of all of you for standing up here. And you are also, an element of change in your environment, in your schools, to a point where you can feel comfortable, and hopefully the administration, everybody can come together and hear your voice, and you can be a part of that positive change, and like you are here tonight. So thank you again for being here.
So I wrote a thing to read because I tend to be long-winded, so I'm just going to look at my clock because reading's not really my forte. School committee is a really, it's an odd thing to do. There's a lot of procedure in it. There's a lot of rules and P's and Q's. It's not really well suited to my personality. It's really not well suited to my personality. And that makes it tough. As a member of this community, as a parent, as a person who cares about education, and as a person who cares about other human beings, when I look at the mission statement, I think that it's so well written. I think that it has the potential to do what it needs to do. But it's important to hear how it's not being executed. It's important to hear how we can meet this ideal. You know, I was really appreciative that the GSA actually allowed me to attend one of their meetings. And if I can say anything about that, it was how, like, amazingly poised and smart and eloquent, and gosh, you all seem so self-assured. You just, like, fill me with hope for this district. I think you should be really proud of yourselves. I cried in front of you before, so I'll do it again now. You know, I'm not by the book for a reason. This has been tough for a lot of you, and as a mom, I never want my kids to go through this. As a person who cares about students, I hate that you're going through this. It is an ugly part of this world, but I will tell you that you are not alone in it, and for our part, within the binds that we can do, we'll do what we can do. We will support staff and students to do what they can do. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but we should keep the dialogue going, I think, is really important. And yeah, I just, you know, all of this, the word inclusive is about belonging, not belonging. Every single student belongs. It is our responsibility to serve you. You are the reason this district exists. It's not for career building, it's not for politics, it's not for ego. It is for students and nothing else. And if we are not meeting your needs, then we have work to do, and obviously we do. So I just, you know, thank you for talking to us, and, you know, I hope that it doesn't just die out here just because of one incident. I hope that we can keep going and move this place forward so that kids can just study for their test and like they should be doing. But really, like, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you speaking. Even if you didn't speak, I appreciate you being here. I know it might not mean a lot, but I do mean it. So thank you.
Julie, do you have anything you want to add?
Sorry, I was just trying to write my words too, because I'm long-winded, but again, I just want to, again, say, I mean, I'm speaking from some other experiences too, so I'm kind of blending a couple of things in here tonight, I guess just because I'm emotional myself. I think that over the many, many years now, I've found that sometimes kids are put in a disadvantage where maybe a kid has, like, it all together and they're kind of left to the side, and then there's kids that really struggle and the teachers may focus on them and feel like, oh, those kids have it all together. And then there's kids that kind of are just made to be, they feel invisible, or they leave feeling like they're not doing a good job. They don't tell people and stuff. And I think it's just important, and I think it's great that kids are here tonight too, to express feelings that they may have that maybe it's uncomfortable to express to other people, and people don't understand what it's like to be in their shoes. And I think that as teachers here, as staff and everybody, I think we just, again, I want to just say that we need to make sure that kids may not show that they're upset, but again, I'm more concerned about what's going on with kids' well-being and with their mental health right now for so many different reasons. And a lot of times people keep things inside of them, and I think that that's dangerous, because there's obviously a lot of emotions right now in here with a lot of different reasons, and I don't ever want to know that, I don't ever want to feel like we're going to lose any kid here because they kept something inside and felt like they were worthless, nobody, not needed, not important, because every single one of you is important and needed and is somebody, regardless of anything. Everybody, any kid in this school. And I don't ever want to hear and see kids leaving this school feeling like they're a nobody and they're worthless. And it's just, I'm just, sorry, I'm too emotional, I think, to continue my speech.
Julie? I have lost sleep the last 3 weeks. It's important for you to know public speak is there for the public to speak. They're within the realms of what we can and can't do as committee. We hurt. I have been in anguish. I am thankful that you all came out tonight because we will be addressing your concerns and how we do it, whether it's in a public or behind, working with Dr. Vera one-on-one. It's a collaboration on both sides. To hear that you are not being treated as equals in this day and age is heartbreaking as a mom, as a parent, and as a member in this community. We have to do better. You deserve better. So I thank you all for coming out tonight. We have work to do.
We do.
And I just want to add, you are why we do what we do. You know, we're all parents up here, and, you know, not only do we want the best for our own kids, is we want the best for Douglas kids all around. So know that, and if there's anything that, you know, you can ever share or, you know, that would be helpful for us to do the best job we can, please come. We welcome you any meeting, anytime. You know, you can find our emails. Please, don't be afraid to keep the conversation going, okay?
So thank you. So now I'm going to read the mission statement, if everybody is okay with that. The Douglas Public Schools offers a diverse learning experience that meets the academic, social, physical, and emotional needs of all the students. We provide a safe and supportive and challenge learning environment in which students may achieve academic success and personal growth. Decisions are made in the best interest of the students. We know we have work to do. We've heard you loud and clear tonight. I thank you all for coming tonight. Now we're going to open it up for the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Before I dive into the COVID updates and turn it over to the building principals, just to our kids, thank you for coming and speaking. As the school committee said, we have a lot of work to do. Those numbers that you gave us both nationally and locally was shocking to me. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Mr. Romano and I will meet with you guys. We have work to do to make sure that this is a safe place for you. Moving on to some COVID updates. As we're now 5 weeks into the school year, we've been tracking the numbers since the end of July. And from July through mid-September, we saw a steady increase in the data. The last 2 weeks, we've seen a slight decline in the data. So the numbers were trending upwards, and now for the past 2 weeks, they've been trending downwards, which is a very positive thing. As you know from last week, the commissioner extended the mask mandate through November 1. He said he would get back to us the middle to end of October as to the next steps. The other thing he mentioned in that advisory was the 80% number, where as of October 15th, if schools had 80% of their students and staff fully vaccinated, they could make the decision to allow vaccinated individuals to unmask. Just want to share some numbers with you. As of September 23rd, we had 44% of our 12 to 15-year-olds fully vaccinated, and we had 65% of our 16 to 19-year-olds fully vaccinated. Now, these numbers include all Douglas residents between the ages of 16 and 19 and 12 and 15, so that includes kids who go to BVT, homeschools, private schools. Nurses are working with the MIS system to be able to pull the information out to be specific just to Douglas public schools, but we're far from that 80% number. In terms of staff, we did an anonymous survey with staff. We had 70% of our staff respond, and out of the 70% that responded, 88.4% are fully vaccinated. If you break it down by building, it's 83% at the primary, 83% at the elementary, 86% at the middle, and 98% at the high school. So we're a lot closer to that 80% number with staff, but we're not there yet with our students. So we'll continue monitoring that.
Can I make a comment to that?
Sure.
I was actually on the phone with the BVT nurse the past few days, and she was sharing with me that there's like no rhyme or reason what's going on right now. It doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not. These people are being tested positive, just so you know. So when we explore like taking off masks and stuff at the 80%, I'm not very comfortable with that. So I'm just going to say that there's no rhyme or reason to anything that's going on right now. And they see a lot more of it than obviously we see here.
Correct. And again, it is a local decision as to whether or not, once you hit that 80% benchmark, whether or not to allow vaccinated individuals not to mask, but we're not even close to that number yet. Test and Stay is up and running. We've been doing it. Just want to remind people that it's only for close contacts in school. So if you're identified as a close contact as a result of being out on a weekend at a friend's house, the Test and Stay is not available to you. It's only for individuals within the school. And the other piece is that even if you do participate in the Test and Stay, you still need to isolate while at home. So you come to school, you do the Test and Stay, doesn't mean that you can go home, go to parties, go out on weekends, do things. You're still supposed to isolate because you are identified as a close contact. Just a reminder, we've seen it happen locally, we've seen it happen here in Douglas, and we're hearing about it across the valley and the state. Just a reminder to people, if you're sick, please stay at home, and if you're living with someone who's symptomatic, please stay at home. We've had cases, again, locally and in the area, where people were sick, came to school, and then the next day tested positive, or were living with someone who was symptomatic, came to school, and 2 or 3 days later, that individual tested positive. So just a reminder to people for that. And then finally, just again, not to sound like a broken record, but a huge thank you to our nurses. Everyone's done a lot during COVID, but behind the scenes, they've done a tremendous amount of work to get the Test and Stay up and running, the new platform with the CIC, and then getting ready to get the pool testing out. They've done a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to make sure that staff and students are safe here. So I just want to thank them publicly again for that. Any questions about the COVID piece?
So I have a question for how do parents go about if they've got their child vaccinated? Because we have to let you know in the school what's the best format. Is it reaching out to the nurse in each one of the schools?
In terms of letting us know if a child's been vaccinated, so right now, the nurses have access to the MIIS system. And with that system, we can pull the information specifically for Douglas students at the high school and middle school as to who is vaccinated or not vaccinated. So we can get that right from the system. So right now, we don't need anything from families. Anything else? All right. Next, the principals are going to come up and present. We'll start with the primary and work our way to elementary, middle, and high school. Ask the principals to put together a presentation to look at our Mcas data, to look at benchmark assessment data, to look at AP scores, and to give the committee and the community an update as to what happened last year. In addition to that, how are we using that data to drive instruction, to inform our instruction, and to put together our remediation plans for the year. So I will turn it over and start with Ms. Sosha at the end of each of the principals' reports. Committee, feel free to ask questions. I need to go move and click. All right.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Yeah, it's in your packet.
So tonight I'm be talking about basically the first grade, current first graders, because those are the students that I would have the data from kindergarten end of year assessments to the beginning of the year this year. In the past, we have used Ames Web Plus. And Ames Web was a timed assessment. It was tested individually. It wasn't really teacher-friendly, and it was time-consuming only because we had our Title I team do the testing for grades K through 5. So we have changed to Renaissance Star Early Literacy and Star Math this year. And why the change? They test as a whole group, whole class. The results were almost immediate. I mean, once the class was done, which was only about 10 or 15 minutes, maybe 20, I could go run that report right away for the teacher. We're still learning about STAR right now. We have a training on Friday to tell us more about the data, more about the reports that are capable for us to be looking at. But we're going to be using that as our guide to kind of give us the outlook on How do we predict the child? How do we improve? How do we look for their growth? How do we track them? How do we compare assessments with them? It does have a home connection for parents, which we had never had with Ames Web before. So once we find out more about that, what's appropriate, parents will be notified on how their assessments are coming out. We'll do reports, diagnostic reports, and we'll also be going into progress monitoring, which Title I has been doing right along, but this has the capability that if a classroom teacher wanted to do progress monitoring, they could also do that bi-weekly. So where are we now and where are my trends? So looking at last year, of course, it's difficult to compare and talk about Ames Web and STAR, so just keep that in mind. Looking at the end of the year kindergarten, in ELA, we had 44 students that were identified as a low risk, and that's the terminology Ames Web would use. There were 14 identified as a moderate or a high risk. So we had a very small class for kindergarten. We only tested 58 students at that time. In math, we had 42, so similar numbers that were low risk, and 16 were identified as a moderate or a high risk. And what were some of the weaknesses that we found? It was basically letter naming, letter sound fluency, nonsense word fluency, which is the decoding of unfamiliar words, number naming fluency, concepts, applications, word problems, and some mental math.
Sorry, Mrs. Socha, could I ask a question quickly? So you said 58 students were tested?
Yes.
So does that mean that all of them are either low or moderate high risk in both ELA and math? We don't have any students who are not at least low risk?
I'm not sure if I understand your question. So 44 out of the 58 were low risk.
The lowest category.
Okay, thank you.
There's no risk.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, I was, you got it. Thank you. That makes me feel a little better. Going on, yep. Sorry.
All right. And so now comparing with first grade, we didn't test right away. We had some, learning to do with the STAR, some technology, and get the kids at least in and used to using the iPad. This was their first time testing on an iPad as well. It worked out really smoothly. We had a staff come in, and the Title I people came in. They assisted the classroom teacher, and it was unbelievable how it worked. The teachers were very pleased with it. I think they had a little anxiety first time around, giving that test to a whole class. And we had similar results, as you can see. In ELA, 41 students, now they use a little different terminology, were at or above benchmark. 19 were identified as either a watch, an intervention, or urgent intervention. And then in math, 46 were at or above the benchmark, and only 11 were at the watch or the intervention. We didn't have any on urgent intervention. And based on what the teachers are seeing, based on what we talked about with all of the teams, it's the same concepts that we're weak in. It's the letter naming and the sounds. It's number application. Some of it with Ames Web, it could have been that they had to read some of the things themselves, where this read it to them, so it's hard to say. Teachers also reported that a lot of number and letter reversals this year that they have noticed. There's always been reversals, but they seem to think there's a lot more. Your B's and your D's, that's so common with kids, but we're seeing more. So how is that data driving our instruction? So we're going to use the data to identify those students who need the targeted intervention, and that's your Tier 2, that's your Title I. It's going to inform the teacher of the individual student's strengths and weaknesses so that they can make a plan for that student and set goals for that student on moving their instruction forward. Maybe how to group them into small groups. It's going to provide teachers with plans for growth. They'll be able to collaborate during their common planning time and strategize and say, how are you dealing with this? I have 3 kids that have a weakness in this one area. And so they'll have that conversation. It's going to identify the gaps, the areas of learning loss. We also use that data when we meet in the student support team If a student is struggling, they'll sit and talk about what are the weaknesses, where are the gaps, what are we doing about it, and what can we do? And they strategize and come up with a plan. So the intervention, I just want to talk about the Title I for a minute, because that's our Tier 2. So typically, the reading specialist or the Title I math teacher would take your highest risk students. And that's usually a small group, which they recommend is 6 students. So out of the whole grade 1, they were seeing 6. The next group would be another group of 6 with a Title I paraprofessional would be modeling exactly what the Title I teacher would be doing, another small group. And that could be a pull out to a Title I room, or it could be a push in. Now that we have a remediation para that we've added on, we can see more students beyond that. So now we'll be taking the next 6 to 8 students. So instead of seeing 12 in the Tier 2 intervention in Title I, we'll be able to see maybe 18 to 20 students. So that's very helpful. So those are the students. They're going to be the high risk, the moderate, and then the watch and the urgent. We're going to continue the progress monitoring. The Title I teachers will be doing that. We'll reassess periodically, and we'll do our second benchmark testing in January. So it's 3 times a year, beginning, middle, and end. So it will be interesting to see in January to be able to compare and really measure some growth. It's nice that our sizes, our class sizes are very small, and we're very fortunate to have 15 to 17 in our kindergarten and first grade classes. So it's easier to make those small groups and to really target to the needs of the students. So how are we actually addressing the skills? So if it were letter naming, at the primary school, any kind of intervention, it's more of your small group. It's during morning meeting. It might be the teacher is taking the attendance slips in, and the paraprofessional in kindergarten is pulling 2 kids and drilling. We use a foundations program. A, apple at, B, bat, ball, ball. And so they're drilling those skills for that. And it could be just that 5 minutes every single morning that that child needs. So that's what you would see at the primary school. That small group, maybe using letter tiles, maybe using picture cards. So whatever it is, if it's math, using manipulatives so that they can model the problem. Putting it into their word problems into a morning meeting. So every morning they do a Google slide and they talk about, social skills, they talk about a lot of things. It's like a pre-teach to the day, and it could be a word problem in math. So that's how we're going to incorporate those skills that they find during the year. And then moving forward, so we are in the midst of our K-5 literacy plan. Mr. Bell and I collaborated on that last year. We're consulting with Claire Landrigan, and so she's coming in and she's doing professional development with the teachers, K-5. We want kids to have more choices for reading. So instead of the reading program, there's 1 story per skill. So it's long A, vowel, they have 1 book. So we want to make sure they can pick another book with that skill at their level. Maybe they didn't like that one was about trains. Maybe they want trucks. Maybe they want dinosaurs. That's a big favorite right now is dinosaurs. So we're building a book room with the help of Claire. She's giving us strategies. She came in already once. She modeled with the teachers read-alouds. And they all do read-alouds in the primary, but she showed them another way. She showed them how to put the kids together after and turn and talk and have a conversation. It's not that easy for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old to do it, but it's doable, with practice. So we're getting a lot of help there. She's also going to be we're going to look at small group instruction, which we do a lot of, encourage independent reading. So when they break off and they're doing centers, the teacher's at a table with one group, there's a center over here and a center over there. We want them to do independent reading once they're able to, of course. That might be the second half of the year. Or to be working on something they have the interest of. We want them to read more, we want them to love reading. That's the whole goal. So in the STAR, we'll be looking for more PD as well. There are so many capabilities of that program, we just haven't been able to get into it all yet. it's fun to sit there and I click on this graph and I'm trying to find different things that we can do with it. And we have our questions too. You know, we look at a report and say, well, why doesn't it do this? So we're ready with, I think Mr. Bell and I both have questions for Friday's presenter. Okay, and then finally, as we go through with this remediation person that we've added this year for a 2-year plan, we're going to reevaluate, is it working? What model are we using? I think in Mr. Bell's building, we're doing one per grade, so every grade has a para to do that remediation. And so we're trying to figure out what's the best way to use that extra person now. Is it going to be pushing into the class? Is it pulling out? But the bottom line is we're servicing more students, so that's a good thing. We want to build the culture of data and reflection with our teachers as well. We've always had some data. Like I said, Ameswood wasn't the easiest to interpret. It wasn't teacher-friendly. The teachers would find out where their students would fall, but it wasn't easy to access any of the skills. With STAR, you click on the student's name, and it brings down a whole list. This is where they fell, you know, in the national norm. They're 86% above everyone in their grade level, you know, things like that. This is where their weakness. This is what they're ready to learn. So that's the kind of conversation we want to have when we're doing common planning time. Have that conversation about data. I would be happy to answer any questions.
I have a silly question. I'm just curious how these kids, you talked about like the B's and the D's, but I'm wondering like more like motor skills. Like when kids come in now after being home for so long, do you find that these kids like, do they seem to know how to do more things, like zip up a jacket, anything, any kind of physical thing, or are they like kind of set behind in those areas?
Yeah, we're finding they don't do a lot with scissors and cutting and things like that, or, you know, we've got them doing with beads, especially, you know, preschool and K. But no, we're not seeing that they're more prepared for that. No. That's a tough one.
So being at home this whole time, you'd think that they would have had that as an advantage. So it's clear that these kindergarten teachers actually really, they help, or the preschool teachers are helping them with that stuff.
Definitely.
Okay.
It's hard. Parents were working
Yeah.
too.
It wasn't easy.
I have a question regarding staffing. So I know recently, the past budget, we cut some paras. So when we talk about remediation para push-in, are we talking about new hires for paras, or are we taking existing paras and how much of their schedule is being put into the remediation push-in? And then while they're doing that work, is there a gap for what they were servicing?
So some of the remediation paras could have been paras that were, I think there was so much movement back and forth. In my building, it happened to be a new person.
Yeah.
Mr. Bell can speak, you know, to him.
But the paras for remediation were an additional grant-funded position.
Okay.
So we weren't taking existing staff, removing them from their role doing A, B, and C.
This
to
is
put them in
additional staff.
This is additional staff that we used our ESSA2 and next year our ESSA3 money to
Okay.
fund.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I have a question and sort of like across the board how this is happening with benchmarks. So with kids that are already hitting the benchmarks, what happens to ensure that they're continuing to progress and be challenged?
That's your small group, that's your centers, it's differentiated instruction.
Okay.
Gee, these have already accomplished that, and so they're ready to move on to the next skill.
Okay.
And that's where your small group comes in.
That was my other question,
And the
like,
teachers at the primary, I have to, you know, they're pros at that.
okay,
With that small group, they've got everyone going in a different direction, and the kids are pretty good about, after they've done it enough times, you're working over here, I've got this group over here, and you're doing, you know, this other activity, so.
okay.
They've got
So
it down.
in the small groups, they're with kids that are at their academic level?
Right, and
Okay.
those are flexible groups, so you might have a skill in math that, you know, they've got that one, but then we get to a new skill, and those groups could change.
Okay. Okay. Is there something, like, does every kid individually get looked at in terms of, you know, how they've progressed
Oh, absolutely.
in terms of the data? Okay.
that's one of the nice parts about this new
It
star.
sounds, yeah, it does sound really great.
Yes, I'm very happy with it.
Okay.
All right. Madam Chairperson, can we do one thing out of order?
Absolutely.
So it was an error on my part. Last week, we had a high school student rep. So this week, I thought we were middle school, but it's actually, this week is high school student rep. So we do have Zofia here for our student rep, and as much as she would, it was my error, as much as she would love to sit through Mr. Bell, Mr. Romano, and Mr. O'Brien's presentation to get to the end, I thought maybe we could have her come up and do her student rep.
Absolutely, I'm so
That was my
sorry.
error.
Thank you. Hello and good evening. My name is Sophia Scherer, and I'm a senior at the high school. I'm here to share with you some of the exciting events and news of what's happening going on at the school. As quarter one progress reports were just issued this past Monday, the students have settled in and started off the year strong with an eagerness and enthusiasm to win. First off, a few weeks ago on September 24th, we had a very successful college fair for students in grades 9 to 12. There are over 60 colleges and universities represented, where students have the chance to start considering and planning for their future after high school by talking and making connections with college representatives to learn more about their institution. This past Saturday was also Oktoberfest, where we had several awesome booths representing the high school, including the DECA Club, athletic boosters, and celebration graduation. The Douglas Marching Band, Chorus, and Blue Light Special also wowed the crowd with entertaining musical performances. In other news, the Douglas community is encouraged to come out and support several senior project events coming up at the high school. Senior Kaylee Boland is hosting a family movie night at the high school soccer field on Friday, October 8th from 7 to 9 p.m. The movie being played is Finding Nemo, and admissions are at least 3 canned goods per group, which will be donated to the local food pantry. Concessions will be provided by Celebration Graduation, with sales to support the class of 2022, so come on down to the high school soccer field with chairs and blankets for a night of family fun. Furthermore, the Douglas Girls Varsity Volleyball and Douglas Varsity Soccer teams will be holding their Dig Pink and Kick for the Cure Senior Night Games for breast cancer awareness. The Dig Pink game will be against Burncoat on Tuesday, October 12th, with varsity at 6:15 p.m. and JV at 5:15 p.m. in the high school gym. The Kick for the Cure games will be on Friday, October 15th at 5 and 6:30 p.m. at the DHS soccer field. Additionally, Celebration Graduation is holding a couple of upcoming fundraisers to benefit the senior class of 2022. They're hosting a Papagenos event on October 7th from 4 to 8 p.m. at Papagenos location in Uxbridge at 158 North Main Street. The class of 2022 will earn 20% of all the sales during this time, and it will be valid for dine-in, carry-out, online, and delivery orders. They will also be holding a pumpkin patch and bake sale at the Douglas Fire Station from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday, October 9th and Sunday, October 10th, Saturday, October 16th and Sunday, October 17th, Saturday, October 23rd and Sunday, October 24th, and lastly, Saturday, October 30th and Sunday, October 31st. Lastly, thank you for those starting to think about college and planning. PSATs will be on Wednesday, October 13th. SATs will be offered at the high school on Thursday, October 28th. And the Guidance Department will be hosting a college financing information night on October 27th at 6:30 in the DHS auditorium. There will be no school this Friday due to Professional Development Day and no school on Monday for Columbus Day. Thank you for your time and attention, and have a nice evening.
Thank you so much for waiting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I follow up? PSATs, is that like all day? Like, so kids miss school during that? Or how does that work? Okay, you'll talk about it.
3 hours.
Okay.
There's a statistic out there, I don't know if it's changed since I was a principal, but kids who take PSAT scores versus kids who don't take PSATs, the SAT scores are significantly higher for kids who take the PSAT. So a lot of schools went to moving to the PSATs from weekends to inside within the school day in order to give kids who may not have the opportunity to come in on a Saturday the opportunity to take the PSAT scores. Because the data is that if you've taken the PSATs, you've been exposed to it, you score a little bit higher than your peers who do not take the test. So we want to give kids that advantage.
It's a good idea.
All right. Mr. Bell.
How's it going tonight? All right, so elementary data. Dr. Vera, can you go to the next slide? Thanks. All right, so what data are we using? Similar to what Cindy said, we're using the STAR assessment this year. Last year we had used Ames Web Plus. We use it in grades 2 through 4, and then for 5th grade we actually use a different assessment. We use NWEA. And the reason why we have that split is because title services technically end. We get support up through 4th grade. And then the middle school actually takes NWEA also. And so that's kind of the breakoff. So we have K through 4 doing one assessment and then 5 through 8 doing NWEA. We get similar data from both. They're just, the NWEA is more tailored to, it's more an older student assessment, whereas the STAR assessment is more tailored to the younger kids. But we get similar data from both. And then we also use our Mcas data, obviously, from grades 3 through 5 to see how we're performing as a school compared to other schools, which is great information also. So I have a chart here that has our Mcas data from last year, and you can see the blue is 2019, which is the last year we took it, and in 2021 was our last year. And so, and on the right, the three on the right there are from the state, the state averages from the school across the Commonwealth. And so you can see ours kind of mirror the states in the drop from 2019 to 2021. I think the math drop is the most significant one. We went from 47% of our kids meeting or exceeding the standard down to 18%, which is a kind of an astonishing number. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. The science and the ELA ones kind of more mirrored what the state was doing, and they're both still above the state average, which is great. We have work to do. We don't want to see those drops, but that you can kind of see the COVID loss that happened across the state, but also here in Douglas with just the remote learning, the hybrid learning, the not really having much learning for the second half of the 2019-2020 year. It definitely impacted our students and the progress that they were making. So where are we now? The trends with the data. So the ELA growth areas, a lot of what we saw was the constructive response, which is an area we typically see that our students struggle with when it's not just they read a passage and answer one multiple choice question. It's the open-ended answer that they have to write a paragraph for. They have to formulate their thoughts. It includes writing. And so that was an area that we were below the state average, which is an area that we need to continue to work on. And then also with that inferencing, analyzing, and interpreting data. So again, not just those right there questions when you say, who is the main character of the story, those types of things. It's the one where they have to think and search and pull multiple ideas from different areas before they can figure out what the solution is. So that was an ELA. In math, the areas that we were below the state average, place value and number sense. So those just their understanding of how numbers work together. With fractions, more of an abstract concept, and an abstract concepts in general. So we had, because of the remote learning in math, kids were not able to use manipulatives as much, get the hands-on piece. It was on a screen with 60 kids and trying to learn math concepts that way. They got the concrete things still. They were still able to learn, their multiplication facts, those basic pieces of information, but then actually being able to apply that to real situations was something that we struggled with on the MCAS, and I think it showed up very clearly with that big dip in data that we had. And so the next slide here is going to talk about how is it driving our instruction. So we talked a lot about, Cindy did a great job at sharing about the new STAR assessment, which is why I like Cindy going first. So we're excited about the data that we're going to get from our STAR assessment, because we gave it the first round. We have our professional development on Friday where we're really going to start being able to dig into the data. And it's not just, they're in the 32nd percentile or 58th percentile. It really drills down to, by standard, what the students have mastered, what they're ready to learn, and what they're not quite ready for yet. It'll allow us to help as we're making small groups and saying these 6 kids have a similar need and are a similar reading level, and we can do a similar lesson with them. This kid is maybe not quite the same and needs their own special attention there. It'll allow us to tailor the needs in that way. And then the progress monitoring tools will allow us to track data more frequently than the 3 times a year that we were able to with Ames Web. So we're excited about using that information to help drive our instruction. So we have the PD, but then there's work we have to do in teams. So when they have their common planning time, we'll be digging into that data and really looking at, how are we using that information to drive our instruction. We can't just look at it and say, yep, we did great, or no, we didn't do great. It needs to really impact what we're doing with our kids. Like Cindy said, we're also working with Claire Landergan, which we're excited about. When she was here last Wednesday and Thursday at the elementary school, it was an awesome 2 days. The conversation with staff was amazing. I was so impressed with how excited our teachers were. It's probably the most excited I've seen them during professional development of any time I've been in Douglas. So that was neat. I think her going in and modeling a 45-minute lesson with each grade and letting the teachers talk about it afterwards and process it and ask questions, I think was really valuable. And I think I've met with 2 of the grades already to do some follow-up work, and I have 2 more to meet with. And the excitement and the energy that they have is really neat. And I think that's going to get passed on to our kids. If several of you have kids in the elementary school and you're familiar with the Wonders program, and it's a 2-week unit, it's great in its own right, but when you do it 2 weeks after 2 weeks after 2 weeks, it can get a little dry. And so I'm excited that we are getting some resources and tools that we can use to supplement that and to keep our reading fresh and exciting, because we really want kids to love reading. If they don't love reading, they're not going to be successful at it. And so we're excited about those ideas that are coming in. The professional development is great. And Claire's fun to work with. She's got a lot of energy, but our teachers are doing a great job of taking that and tailoring it to how does that work in Douglas with the resources that we have. And we've also been, I use my staff meetings for a lot of professional development. On Monday we had a staff meeting, we talked about the math manipulatives and making sure that math manipulatives our students have access to those manipulatives as we're learning concepts, and understanding that last year we weren't able to do that, and it had a very negative impact on how much our kids were able to master it and make concrete. Those abstract concepts in math, if you're not a math person, when you start talking about fractions and multiplying fractions or reducing fractions, it's really hard for them to figure out why the things work the way they work unless they can get their hands on it, really move things around and see what it looks like when you multiply a fraction and why the numbers do what they do. And so that we need to make sure on a daily basis kids have opportunities to manipulate math with their hands and to connect it to the real world, because if they don't make a connection, then they can't learn it. And then we're using our common planning time. If you don't know, each grade has common planning time once every 4 days. We do a rotation. And with that common planning time, we're going to be looking at the data, and then we're also going to be working on that professional learning, implementing those things that we're learning as we do, as we work through Claire or the data piece and all of those things. And then we're also using that common planning time to identify students that need that additional support. We have an SST process for students that aren't making progress like we'd expect them to. We have our Title I program, so we identify students for that and problem solve what's going to best meet their needs, or do we need to look at our special education programming and seeing if that's effective. So our common planning time is a great time to look at data and talking about kids. And I think one of you asked about the STAR assessment. One of the great things it does is it projects growth, and we can look at individual growth for students and say this student scored here this time. When we test them in January, it tells us where they should score in January, and we can see if we're on track with that or not. And it actually gets better over time as we get more samples. It does a better job projecting the growth that those students are going to have, which is exciting. And then with intervention and remediation, like Cindy said, we've expanded our Title I program. We have one unfilled position because it's hard to hire people right now, but our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade all have a dedicated Title I paraprofessional that's working with them. We have 2 new employees that have been fantastic so far. I was in Laura Cordani's room today, and she was actually doing a co-teaching lesson with one of them, kind of modeling what it should look like, and then next week that new employee is going to be taking on her own groups and doing that. So Laura's done a great job of getting them ready to be in the classrooms and doing the work with the kids we need them to do, and we're excited that we're able to dedicate more staff to those grade levels to provide that support. Like I said, the new benchmarking tool that we have is going to really help us identify what students have mastered and what they're ready to learn. And then that we have a renewed emphasis on that small group instruction. We have kids that are ready to go, that are way above where they need to be, and we have students that are really struggling with the learning, and COVID impacted everybody in a lot of different ways. And one thing we have to do as a school is make sure we're meeting everybody's needs, and there's no way to do that if I'm standing up at the front of the room and teaching 27 kids all at the same time. And so small groups are really the way to do that, and so that needs to be happening consistently in math and in reading on a daily basis. And so Claire Landergren, the next time she comes in, what she's working with our staff on are small groups, and we do small groups at the elementary school, but I think it's going to give us a different look at what those small groups can look like and how we can work with kids in those. So we're excited about that. And our plan moving forward, like we already talked about, that K-5 literacy plan, I've been really excited about that. I love that Cindy and I have been able to work collaboratively with that, and we're able to do it K-5 because I think in order for our kids to make growth, if every couple of years we're making significant changes to what the expectations are and how, the language and all those things, I think it's really challenging for kids. Whereas if we can have a cohesive plan all the way through, we're going to have a better impact on kids. We need to continue to support the SEL needs of our kids. If kids aren't happy and safe at school, they can't learn. We're doing a lot of work through our morning meetings. We're doing a lot of things to try to make school as fun as possible with our community meetings and just things we're doing throughout the day, because we want kids to want to come to school and they want to learn. We're going to continue to use that data to assess, and one of Paul's favorite things is to pivot, right? If things aren't
My
going...
favorite thing.
No, one of your favorite phrases. No.
Yeah, it's better.
But if kids aren't where we think they should be, then we can't just keep trucking along. We got to change course. And then we got to get back to good teaching. Our teachers did an amazing job last year with the remote piece, but it's not the way that we know the classroom should be. And we're excited to have kids back in school this year, every day, our whole class, and we're able to do great teaching. We're able to use the manipulatives and make learning fun and get their hands on things and really make those connections. And so we're excited to get back to that, because I think that's going to make that the most positive impact on those assessment scores. The assessment scores, when I shared them with staff, they were mortified because they worked so hard last year, and I think it was defeating almost. But there's a reason why it happened, and I don't think it's because of anything that our teachers did negatively. It was because it was just a rough time for everybody, for adults and for kids. But I'm excited to see us bounce back this year and really make a positive impact with kids.
I have a question, and so it sounds like you've learned a lot already from doing the STAR. How quickly can changes be implemented? Now we're in October, so that you can utilize like the rest of the school year to really make.
So we're getting the PD on Friday, and so with staff, we wanted to get the assessment, we wanted to identify kids for title, but we haven't really dug more into the data than that. We wanted to get the training on Friday is all about the reports and how to get that information, and after that, that's when we can dig into it. And I know that now it's a couple weeks old, but the great thing about this assessment is that it has those progress monitoring tools, and if there's a kid that we think didn't really do the way they should, we can give the test as many times as we want. You're supposed to give it 3 times a year, but if you gave it to a kid 12 times a year, you can do that too. And so I think after we get that training and kind of see what information's there, we can see if we have what we need, and then we need to start using it right away to start planning our instruction. So we have our standards. We know we have to teach, and this is something we talked about as an administrative team. We know we have a 3rd grade curriculum. We have to teach that 3rd grade curriculum, even if our kids are, if we have kids at the 1st grade level, we still have to teach them the 3rd grade curriculum. But what are we going to do to scaffold those supports and make sure that they're going to be successful with that 3rd grade curriculum? So what do we need to build on what holes can we fill as we're doing that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. My other question is with that math data that you had included here. So I was noticing, so pre-COVID, the numbers were slightly lower than the state number.
Yep.
And then post-COVID, dramatically lower. What, is there sort of some, looking at the math that's was happening? Like, is there some?
I think math has been something that we've worked on it's always been an area, I think as a district even, and not even just at the elementary school, that we've been, for some reason, ELA has always been higher than the state average, and math is, I shouldn't say for some reason, there is a reason, but math's always been a little bit more of a struggle. I think a lot of it comes down to those abstract concepts and giving kids hands-on learning opportunities. Again, we have a wonderful resource. Go Math is great, but it is very surface level, and we have to find ways to supplement to take it deeper than what the learning is in the textbook. And so some of it's going to be us having to dig into some resources and figuring out, okay, so our kids don't know their fractions. What do we have to do that? Well, we need to, like I said, we need to get the fraction kits out. There's a little, and have kids mess with it. We might use it once, but why aren't we using it every day? Those types of things. And so it's something that we've been working on. And I also think small group instruction is not just for reading, but in the past, that's kind of how it's been. Reading gets the small group instruction, everything else is whole class. And I think we need to do more of that small group instruction within math, because we have kids that have mastered, they're in 4th grade, they know a lot of the 5th grade skills already, and we have other kids that are still working on that, subtraction with regrouping. And so we need to be able to differentiate within that and fill those holes. But you can't do that with 27 kids all at the same time. You really got to do the small groups.
Have you collected any data with ST Math? I know that's been implemented
So
in between.
last year, our implementation, Cindy and I are both using that at our buildings. I think there's some positives to it, but I also think last year was a hard one to judge how effective it was because it wasn't, the goal of ST Math is for it to be done during the school day, and last year it was done independently at home on the days that the kids were remote for the most part, or it was a homework piece. And so this year, we're starting to use it more as, when we're doing those small groups of math, and we can have kids working on ST Math and those types of things. And so in order for ST Math to work, it has to be done with fidelity. You're supposed to get a certain number of minutes a week. And last year, we did a great job of getting some minutes, but we did not reach the thresholds that they say you have to be at to make that positive impact. And so that's one of our goals this year. We've met with the group from the ST Math. We have a person that's assigned to us that works with us, and we've worked on, what can we do to kind of get that participation up so that we can see the positive gains from it.
Could I ask about the nature and frequency of feedback to families based on testing
Oh,
results?
what? I'm sorry.
The nature and frequency of feedback given to families based on testing results. So for example, let's pretend my kid magically knows fractions but not multiplication skills. Or I conversations with parents all the time. I'll hear how did they not qualify for Title I math? Or she got 100 on this? Are they all getting 100s? So is it just during parent-teacher conferences?
And that's been a conversation we've had already because with STAR assessment, there are some great parent reports that show kind of that trajectory your kid is on, how they're scoring, and so again, we haven't had, I was trying to dig into the reports to try to find the best. There's 10 different parent reports you can share, and I'm waiting until Friday. That's one of the questions I have is, what is a parent report that could be effective? We don't want to give one that has so much information that it's like jargon that it doesn't make a lot of sense. We want to give something that's simple and concise, but also gives parents an idea of where their kid's at and how they can help their kid be more, what can they do with their kids at home.
Yeah.
And so I think that report's there, and our plan is kind of like MCAS. We're working on mailing out MCAS letters right now. Kind of whenever we take those benchmarks to 3 times a year, a week later you should get a letter coming home with your kid that says, here's how they did on that assessment. I think that'll help because you'll be able to see the progress over time. When parents talk to each other, they can say, well, my kid scored here, that's why they qualified for title, and my kid scored here. And it'll kind of help with some of those things. But we haven't, that was another problem with Ames Web, is that the reporting was very hard there wasn't great information. It was hard to share the information with parents in an easy, concise way without creating our own reports and writing all of it. So this is easy. It prints it for us, and it gives all the information that you need.
Yeah. I think that's ideal. If there's a way to utilize the testing that you're already doing to provide feedback so that teachers aren't scouring through a 27 student roster and saying, what 5 things would I recommend work on? But if there's data that's readily available, because I think if students can get support at home, it's going to take many hands to sort of right the ship after COVID, during COVID.
John, I was going to add too that there is a portal, it's a parent portal, and we haven't, again, we're waiting for some of that training on there where parents can actually sign on and go in and probably see some of the reports themselves.
Yeah.
But we're just not there yet to put it out there.
Yep.
So this first round was kind of let's figure out what it is and how it works. I'm really happy with it. Like Cindy said, I'm real impressed with how quick we got the information and the information we're getting. I'm excited about Friday to get even more information. But we weren't ready to start. I don't want to send the wrong thing home and then have people wondering what the heck did you just send home. So I think we'll get more information, and that's the kind of the plan moving forward that we've been talking about.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Brien.
Good evening. This is going to be, excuse my voice, I lost it. This is going to be a little bit of the Department of Redundancy Department as we go through the measurements that we use for the data and talking about data. Once you go down that rabbit hole of data, it's very easy to get lost and circle around. But I think we have to remember is how does this data help each and every student? And we can make all the fancy graphs that we want, pie graphs, charts, but how does this really impact a student in the classroom? So our main ways is the MCAS, of course, and the MCAS is almost like the autopsy because it's already happened, it's gone. with that NWEA testing, or some folks call it MAP testing, we're able to see those assessments. We can see what the data shows us and care for the patient as they go. But I think we need to take it a step further with, after every class that the teacher teaches, did the student understand the concept of that objective for the day? Back to that 40-minute, 45-minute time frame. Did each student understand that, that concept? And then how do we reteach and keep going, as was previously said, making sure we follow the grade level curriculum, but get students up to par for the lost time. Our 8th graders have not had a normal middle school year yet. And you can really see that right at the beginning, the awkwardness that they had. And I don't think it's a lack of will on when it comes to whether academic or behavioral. I think it's much more a lack of skill. And we have to teach them those skills to respond well in the classroom setting. So where are we now with the data? Very strong in 6th grade ELA, and I think that's students just naturally read and write a lot more than they tend to take out their calculator or work on fraction problems. Even when they don't think they're doing schoolwork, when they're reading or writing, they are. But looking at, as Mr. Bell said earlier, the math, we need a lot of work to do in math. And I don't think there's, almost every family sits around and reads a book together. I know I never sat down with my kids and said, can we do fractions tonight for fun? pass the tomato sauce. So that's what we're looking at. And also, I'm a little, I take the MCAS scores with a grain of salt from last year, because when you mentioned to a group of middle school students that it doesn't count, that how accurate is that data? But that's the data we have, that's the scorecard we have to use, and that's what we have to go by. Also, we did not have 100% of our students testing MCAS, so those students who did not test, we have to assume that they scored a 0 until they prove us wrong. Because I'd much rather err on the side of caution than say, oh, this great student, he knows well, he would have scored advanced. Next slide. Very similar to what you've seen before. We're very even with the state, but there was a drop-off.
I think is this the same graph? Are we?
Yeah, I noticed that too.
This is the same graph, right? So that we're not actually seeing the Douglas data.
Or we're not seeing the state data. There's no way they're identical for.
Okay, that would be user input error.
Fine.
So if you wanted to go back to the page, the slide before,
Yeah.
Dr. Viera. So in grade 6, it was 62 to 47 DMS to the state for exceeding or meeting or exceeding expectation. For math, grade 6, 38 to 33, way too close. English language arts, 41, 43, too low. Mathematics, 48 to 35 for the state. What jumps off is that grade 8 mathematics, 28 to 32. That's eyebrow raising, what's going on there. So then we look at the NWEA data. That was administered in the fall of 2021, approximately 2 weeks ago. The most eye-opening thing is that spread in scores between 4 and 60%. And when I looked at the results, all over the place, what skills, especially in math, what skills students have and what they lack. For example, in one grade 6 test, long division, there was a huge gap in long division of what the students should be performing at this grade level. Majority would have scored warning or less on MCAS on this NWEA testing. And historically, high scores were not there. The super advanced scores, the advanced, they were missing. So how do we fix all that? Well, we have to look at, the biggest thing is reading and writing stamina. Just to be able to comprehend a long passage.
Sorry.
That constructed response, and whether that is for math or ELA, there just seemed to be the impatience with taking that test, or the impatience with, I want to construct a thoughtful, long answer, We have to build up that stamina. In math, we're looking at the NWA testing. We have to individualize it for each student, which is going to take a lot of work for those math teachers. I did receive an email from a parent that was very complimentary to Ms. Finley on how much her child enjoys math. So it's those little class-by-class things, I think, will get our most bang for the buck. And the research shows very clearly that the biggest reason for growth in student learning is that classroom teacher. So if you have that warm, welcoming environment where you challenge students, where they feel comfortable, that's where you're going to get the most growth. And that's what we're looking for this year, is growth. How much can we grow? In data, so this is at the point of our PD on Friday, is really how can we track the data for every class of what they are doing without overwhelming the teachers. They still have to teach. They should not have to be looking at data just doing data, because you can get lost in it. But how can they quickly and efficiently track student learning? A lot of things teachers already know, they do, but I've never seen teachers work so hard for so little result than I did last year and the year before. No matter how hard they work through no fault of their own, no matter how hard the families work through no fault of their own, there is a gap in learning, and we have to address that. As Mr. Bell answered, and sometime the middle school is going to have to go first, so you guys don't step on all my lines. But that common planning time is excellent for having these discussions, not only about academics, but on our new schedule, I want to make sure I'm not stepping ahead of the line. On all our, every day teachers have at the middle school, and I'll thank Mr. Olson for putting the schedule together, the prep period and a CPT, a common planning time period. What's important about that is each week, myself and the adjustment counselor will meet with that group. We do have our student support team, but it's nice to sit in a small room with just the teachers and us to figure out what are we doing and how can we help students learn, and what are some of the obstacles they are facing. And again, if they're not looking forward to coming to school, the best curriculum in the world won't change that. So how do we address those needs? And that's that targeted instruction. So that common planning time is paying huge dividends already just to discuss those issues and having teachers have the opportunity to talk about instruction. Remediation Program, this was what our Tier 2 intervention was, an Academic Development Center and a Flex Center. For the Academic Development Center, that's for students if they have a specific skill they need to build, they can work on there, and it's staffed all day long, and teachers who do not teach an elective or related arts, during that period, they go down to assist. And that will pay huge dividends, especially as we look at this data and say, okay, I need you to go work on this for a while, because there's staff there. Other thing we're working on is developing common formative assessments, and that's part of our Friday PD too. So in between the NWEA testing and the daily testing, how do we see if we're achieving our goal of educating the students? And again, that's a little bite size, so that's really working with the patient while he's right there, instead of waiting for it to be too long. How can we track that? The Flex Center is part of our special education program where kids can come in and out. So, for example, if a student had a broken leg and couldn't make it to all their classes, instead of just throwing them right in, we ease them into the school day, or then pull them back out. This Flex Center. And then, at which point do we say, all right, this student could be qualifying for special education? Has that been missed throughout the course of the student's career? Which is very tough during the COVID climate to see, is it lack of knowledge, lack of attendance? Are these the issues that are driving the lack of learning as opposed to a specific learning disability? Curriculum and instructional changes, again, that's at Tier 1 in the classroom. What do we do every day to help our students learn? And our SMART goals have to be aligned to the data, instruction, and assessment. So the SMART goal that's being rolled out to the middle school is something as simple as, which I've seen work very effectively, as an exit ticket. Did those students learn what was expected today? And in a quick little glance of the eye, the teacher can see yes or no, who do I have to reteach, what has to do, and then we can track that. So then when we do meet during CPT or student support team time, we have that data to make our decisions. We also look at developing embedded into staff meetings, co-teaching. to make sure that we're making the most effective use of our staff as we can in that classroom. So you have that core specialist, and we have the special education teacher. How can they work off each other? So the goal is, when you walk into a classroom, you do not know if this is a special education teacher or the core teacher. You don't know if it's their kids, my kids. It's all of our students, and that's what we're working on. And then the PD is based on the feedback from classroom visits. So while I'm in the classroom and I'm checking things out, and I'm listening to the teachers and I'm listening to the students, what can we do? Where are the needs of our staff to better improve student learning? And then increased Tier 2 interventions. What can we do after school to assist these students? What can we do during the school day to assist these students when it goes beyond that Tier 1 classroom to catch up for those gaps? And the question is, as we go through, say, a grade 7 math curriculum, but they're still needing some grade 5 or grade 6 skills, how do we continue to catch these kids up and follow the curriculum? In ELA, and as a recovering ELA teacher, it works pretty well that you know where the standards go from grade to grade to grade. In math, if you can't do long division, it makes it much more difficult to go on to the next step of mathematics. So it's tough to do. It's not an easy fix, and there are a lot of gaps. But with the co-teaching and with the other implementations of the Tier 2 and tracking that data, we hope we can catch up as much as we can this year. And moving forward, an additional block of daily instruction was added. For grade 6, it's reading across the curriculum. In grade 7 and 8, it's writing across the curriculum. So what that is, you'd be writing about math for a quarter, and then the students rotate. And they learn about writing social studies and then science. So it's not just the ELA teacher. And that hopefully will build up the stamina that the students need. And then the math challenge, completing the curriculum while remedying English teacher, gaps in learning. How do we do that at the same time? Once you go down the wormhole of data, it's tough to get out.
Yeah.
You look up and a couple hours went by. It's worse than YouTube.
I'm wondering, Mr. Bell, I know that you're working really closely with Ms. Sosha. Has there been any plan to kind of ease that transition from elementary to middle school?
Yeah. Yes, and I believe that's on the superintendent's docket, is that vertical alignment.
Okay.
And I know Ms. Sosha has worked together.
Okay.
I will say that, being in several other districts, the cohesiveness and cooperation among the administrators is something special here that you don't see in every school district. Usually there's a lot of competition, a lot of heads butting. This is how can we support and help each other.
Office fairly new. We already talk all the time. I think all our work Cindy and I are doing has been going on for a couple of years. Like, we're going to get it going through middle school and high school too.
Okay, that's great.
And the same goes for the high school principal, Josh Romano, of saying, here's what we're doing,
Yep.
come on up. Here's a club that we have, here's an organization, we're going to reach out to you, how do we do that? So as we unfold this and get going forward, I'm looking for great success.
Okay. 'Cause I can see, some kids coming into the elementary school with challenges that they may continue with or may be able to improve through those 4 years that they're at elementary, and, identifying who are those ones that we can change these things before we get to 6th grade, because 6th grade is tough. I know from experience, it was a tough time, so.
Yeah, any transition's tough. That 5th to 6th grade transition is very tough.
Yeah.
And the data would back you up on that 100%.
And if you don't have what you need, it's really hard to get it at that point, so.
So I'm really proud of the fact that the teachers spent the first few weeks really trying to build those skills of the SEL skills and making people feel welcome and students feel welcome. And I think they built a really strong foundation of those relationships with their students to keep moving forward.
Mhm. That's great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Mr. You've had a lot of time to prepare.
So the data that we're using is the MCAS for ELA, math, and biology. That's still the competency determination for graduation, so it's kind of the main driver for making sure that students are able to graduate. We also looked at the AP exam data, the advanced placement exam data. It says SEL survey data, social emotional learning survey data. I actually haven't done the social emotional learning survey. It should say school climate. That other survey is coming later. And then at the high school, we do a lot of teacher-generated assessments. We're not using things like Ames Web and things like that. They're not really designed for the high school level. So we use teacher-generated assessments like pre-test. The ELA department did a significant writing pre-assessment the first week of school, for example. And then the formative assessments that teachers use, whether that's exit tickets or other ways of just measuring the effectiveness of the lesson. The trends with the data, as far as math, statewide, the scores in math dropped from 59 to 52%, students meeting or exceeding expectations. In DHS, there was a significantly larger drop from 59 to 47%, meeting or exceeding. The student growth percentile is the measure of how much students learned between grade 8 math MCAS and the grade 10 math MCAS. The average is 50. It's on a scale of 1 to 99. At Douglas High School, that student growth percentile fell short of the average. It was at 41%. For ELA, it's actually the opposite story. Scores improved across the state in ELA from 61% meeting or exceeding expectations to 64%. That was statewide. At Douglas High School, that growth was significantly larger, 63% to 73% meeting or exceeding. Student growth percentile was above target at 56%. And again, that's the difference between their 8th grade and their 10th grade MCAS test. Science was a little strange. So in 2021, only honors biology students in grade 9 took the MCAS test at Douglas High School. Grade 10 students are exempt from that competency determination due to COVID. So as long as they pass a biology course, they don't have to take the MCAS science. 96% of Douglas students were advanced or proficient in Douglas versus 67% statewide. But again, in Douglas, it's a very small number of students, those honor students in grade 9 who are taking it. Grade 10 students who took college prep biology do not have to take the MCAS. And student growth percentile is not calculated for science because the 8th grade test is significantly different from what students take in the 10th grade. And then our advanced placement data. So AP tests are scored on a scale of 1 to 5, with 3, 4, or 5 are passing or qualifying scores where students could potentially get credit for the course awarded by a college. DHS offers 13 different AP exams in 2021. 47% achieved a qualifying score. That's slightly down from previous years. We're usually right around 50%. That represents 4 kids not making a qualifying score that otherwise had in other years. The average score in that 1 to 5 scale actually rebounded a little bit from a high in 2019. I would attribute most of that to that these are very content-heavy tests. So if in AP history, the class was only meeting once a week and then doing everything else online, it's a lot of content that may not have been covered in the same depth that it would have been, or that definitely wasn't covered in the same depth that it would have been in a 5-day-a-week course. And that was generally where we found those areas of where we had dropped. So the ones that are heavy in content like biology, government, economics, and history were the ones that suffered significantly. There were tests where we actually went up, so AP literature, we did better than we normally do, and a lot of them stayed about the same. So I think the big factor there, though, that took us down was just the lack of instructional time.
Did you find there was any significant change in number of students taking AP exams?
So it did drop slightly, and that was due to students who were in AP courses just electing not to take the exam, which I do strongly discourage. I think they're better off taking the exam and getting a 1 and still having advanced placement on their transcript. If they refuse to take the test, it drops to honors. I understand not wanting to spend the money on something that you're going to fail, but it does drop, their transcript drops from advanced placement to honors. And I'd never look at a teacher's advanced placement scores as a measure of their effectiveness as a teacher. It's really not a fair thing to do because we want as many kids as possible taking advanced placement exams. And if you start judging teachers based on their AP scores, you start getting gatekeeping where they it's in their benefit to not let kids take it. I'd rather kids take an AP exam, get a 1 on the, or take an AP course, and now they've got that on their transcript. So, as far as where we are in the trends with the data, so the good news with ELA is that we were above state average in all areas, every single area, and we were significantly above in most of them. Vocabulary acquisition and use was the closest to the state average. We were at 79%, students got 79% of those questions right versus 78% for the state. And that was actually, vocabulary acquisition and use was the department goal for ELA pre-COVID. But I do think that they're probably going to shift that more towards reading comprehension and writing. In math, there were a number of growth areas. Those are the 4 standards with the largest discrepancy or gap between the state average and the school average. So those are areas of focus that teachers should work on. But in a lot of those cases, it's one question in the test that is for a particular standard. So I've tried to exclude those and go for those are the ones that if we improved more on them and the test stays weighted towards those standards, we'll get the biggest gain. Science, it was very skewed data. So it's when everybody passes and everybody does really well, it's really hard to say where to improve because we're not really seeing that other side of it. And the Mcas test is changing this year for science. It's finally switching to the computer-based next generation test. So I haven't really looked at it. The practice tests were just released. I haven't really looked at it enough to see how significantly different it is from the previous Mcas iteration. But based on our department analysis that I've done, writing and reading comprehension was a thread that went through several of the departments, that students are very capable of reading, but they're not taking meaning from what they're reading as a skill that they need to work on. That was from the history department, the Spanish department, and the ELA department. All have noticed that trend. And then just in general improving writing, and that in previous years our students were significantly better writers than what we had seen years prior to that. So there had been a significant increase in the quality of writing that students were exhibiting when they came to the high school. And that dropped off a little bit, and I have to assume that that's just that they were doing less writing under hybrid circumstances. Our students were doing less writing, so I can't imagine the middle school students were able to keep up with that too. So those are kind of the focus areas to meet those Mcas areas, and then the general one of writing and reading comprehension. So staff have been collecting data, including things like pretest and writing data, and we've been reviewing it in common planning time. Again, that's where we found that gap in reading comprehension. And from there, it informs class instruction, it informs the type of interventions that they're doing, and their remediation efforts. So for example, the Mcas retest is coming up November 9th and 10th, I think it is. So we're working on our intervention blocks with the students who didn't meet expectations yet to get them the skills that they need to get where they need to be for that test. The ELA history and Spanish departments seem to be focusing more on writing and reading comprehension. So in Spanish, it's that target language. Spanish is also working on the auditory component too, because a lot of students didn't get the opportunity to practice that the way they would have in 5 days a week of school versus 1 day a week in class and the rest online. And math has really been working that acceleration model of assessment that the state recommended that schools use. So instead of looking at your students and saying, okay, they only learned what they should have learned through March of grade 9, so with grade 10, we're going to start with April and start there. Well, then you never get where you need to be. So instead, they are kind of taking that, we're going to teach grade 10 math to 10th graders and measuring where they are, teaching them the skills that they need to get up to what they need to know for that grade 10 content, and then going on from there. So if they're going to multiply polynomials, one of the things you have to be able to do is distribute. So if they give a pretest and the kids don't know how to distribute, they spend some time working on that. And then we're doing advisory lessons on SEL competencies, those social emotional learning competencies, the responsible decision making, social awareness, self-awareness, and self-advocacy, and then executive functioning skills like problem solving, goal setting, personal organization, those types of things. And I'm very glad to hear the staff tonight say how committed they are to working those skills. As far as intervention and remediation, we do have an intervention block that's meeting on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning. So it's only about a half hour. We're kind of easing our way into it. I think a lot of the staff really enjoyed the intervention block that we had last year. It was really long, but it was once a week, and the kids were kind of able to get a lot done. Now it's 30 minutes, but Students get to go to the teacher that they need to go to, or they can just stay in their first period class and use it as a study hall. And teachers can also assign students to attend their interventions. And so now progress reports came out, so teachers I'm getting a lot more CCs of emails to students saying you need to be at my intervention. We have offered it as a senior privilege because there haven't really been senior privileges the last few years, that seniors can come in after intervention as long as they're caught up. So I think it's been a good motivator for students. We have our first senior who was told he had to come in for intervention for Tuesday, or tomorrow actually, so we'll see how that goes over. I think that's an effective deterrent to make sure that students are doing their work. We also started an after-school intervention last week. This is a grant-funded position after school. It's a drop-in Tuesdays and Thursdays for an hour. And it's also, we've been offering it when we talk to parents who are worried about their students' grades or their students are struggling. We've been offering it as another alternative. They can just have their student drop in for that. It also runs the same time and place as Game Club. It starts about a half hour earlier, so there's a little bit of bait and switch there. So when I walk by, Game Club kids are in there already working. So kind of like that too. And then kind of big picture things moving forward. So we're doing the PD Day on Friday, we're doing some data analysis work because, I think you can never, my goal is to make them more capable of looking at the data independently, instead of me having to be at a common planning meeting to go over the data and kind of set the agenda, to empower them to do that. And I want to introduce some concepts of UDL, which is an instructional model, universal design for learning. And it's pretty commonly found these days in a lot of schools. To fully implement it is a major project. But I think there are some things that we can bring in. Two of the primary tenets of UDL are that you're presenting information to students in multiple ways. So the student who is an auditory learner versus a visual learner versus a kinetic learner. And maybe more importantly and more pertinent for what we're going to do on Friday, that there's multiple means for students to demonstrate their learning. So if they're not the type of student who's going to do well on a multiple choice test, but maybe they'll do really well just with a verbal presentation or something like that. So there's multiple means for students to show that they're capable of doing the work. So the student who can't do the timed math test, I've got one period to do this, maybe there's another way that they can show that they've mastered those skills. And then continuing to expand our co-teaching strategies. So we have, we added another special education teacher. We have co-teaching in every grade in the 4 primary content areas. And we've got some pretty good matches going with that. And I lost my best co-teacher from the special ed department, Megan Zabicki, when she got promoted. But I brought some good people in, run into people who have experience working in classrooms. So I think that was really beneficial, and I'm looking forward to seeing how those strategies are implemented. We made a significant change to the math curriculum last year. We had a track basically that was Algebra 1B and Geometry Concepts, the idea being they teach the material a little bit slower. Well, since there's 180 days in the school year, if you teach the material a little bit slower, I don't think they were getting through the full curriculum. So we dropped that and we have shifted to focusing more on the inclusion model and having classes supported by special education staff, whether it's pairs or teachers or sometimes both. Every student who didn't meet expectations on the MCAS exam last year was in that Algebra 1B or Geometry Concepts track. So I think that there's a lot of benefit to eliminating that and bringing every student up to a basic level of math. And then again, addressing those key areas of social emotional learning and executive functioning between lessons that we're doing in our advisory block. We did one the other day on kind of self-destructive behaviors and how, identifying them in yourself and avoiding them, things like avoiding work, procrastination, things like that, that kids were able to get into those habits a little bit better with hybrid education. I'm not going to see my teacher for a week, so I can, why would you put off till tomorrow what you can put off till next week? So trying to break those types of habits. I actually think that stuff's a lot more effective to do when it's embedded in instruction. So if you're going to teach students how to collaborate, you're better off doing that while they're collaborating on something in, a project in history or something like that. So we're going to do a little bit of that during our faculty meeting on Friday as well. That's been a big area of research that I've done. So that's what we're working on. And again, very glad to hear how that the staff is really concerned about those SEL issues. And we did a survey in the spring where staff identified those executive functioning skills that they most think that the kids need, and those are the lessons that we've been trying to bring into advisory and embedding in the classroom. kind of a benefit to go last. Everybody's a little more tired. I didn't get nearly as many questions as Cindy. Either did a much better job, or or you guys are getting tired.
Well, while you're up here, you can answer first. How are we on staffing? The couple positions that have been kind of always floating out there?
They're still floating out there. We met today on it. We're still short in trying to find paraprofessionals and
Could you
ABAs
run
across
through
the
about
buildings.
where there's still staffing shortages?
Do you want to start, we'll start with Cindy.
I am looking for a .5 ABA and a long-term sub for grade 1.
I'm looking for 5th grade remediation para, 2 ABAs, a long-term sub for Mrs. Blessing, and soon to be a long-term sub for an ABA.
I'm short 2 ABAs.
In stars, still?
Yep, both in stars. I was short 3. I was able
You
to
got
fill
one.
1. So
I was on School Spring.
Middle school?
I'll wait till he gets back, not to misquote. I was on School Spring this afternoon after we met, and I think the postings were refreshed on September 15th. And if you look at each of the job postings, there was one applicant for each of the postings. Mr. Romano got creative, and when you go into School Spring, you can do a reverse search to say, who's interested in being a paraprofessional? So Josh did that and started cold calling anyone within a 20, 30-mile radius.
I've done that before and been successful, and nobody is biting.
What's the pay rate, and do you have to be do you have to have any certifications?
So for ABA, we're all missing ABAs, right? Yeah, so for ABAs, the certification is there's a 40-hour online course that they have to take. It doesn't, my daughter did it in about 20 hours. It's not really a 40-hour course, but it's a fairly straightforward thing. The pay rate, there's 2 different rates, one for bachelors and one degreed and not degreed.
Yeah, paras and ABAs. Oh, I can't remember.
I just want to see if it's
can't-
worth me
yeah.
quitting my job to.
We just signed, I think we just signed the contract, we haven't yet, I'm sorry, wrong contract. I have 4 in my head. We are in the process of finalizing our ABA and para contract, whether we agreed in principle, but we're finalizing the language, so the pay rates will go up from what's in the past contract, but we're still finalizing those numbers in the language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that should help.
With the paras and the ABA, so that should help.
Yep.
Correct, but I asked the principals to talk to Mrs. Tibbetts tomorrow to refresh the posting, because when you look on School Spring under AB, for a paraprofessional job, the most current ones are at the top, so with school districts constantly looking, I was at a Worcester County Superintendent's meeting yesterday, and a Blackstone Valley one 2 weeks ago, and everyone's struggling to find teachers, ABAs, paras.
Custodians,
cafeteria workers.
Everything.
It's bad.
And everybody's caught on to the refreshing thing, too, I
And
think.
everyone's caught on to the refreshing thing,
Because I've been
too.
doing it, too, so,
Yeah.
you know.
Paul, have you reached out to the colleges?
I know some of the principals have reached out locally to Worcester State, Framingham State, Nichols, and
My district got, I think, 7 new hires last week
from,
from Worcester State and from Quincy.
okay.
So it's definitely worth a shot.
Oh, yeah.
And they were actually, like, I would want my kids to work with them, so.
And they were actually pretty good.
Yes, and they're actively,
Yeah.
you know, they're gonna want to stick around.
That's good to know. I know we've reached out, but we didn't have any luck, but that's good to know recently you did. Can you email me some contact information? Thank you.
Yeah, I almost offered Johnny a job last week, so it was pretty. Still thinking about it.
Yeah.
He's weighing his options.
Mr. O'Brien, can you tell us, we're just doing how many positions, what positions are still vacant in your building?
I'm sorry, I can't.
What positions are still vacant in your building?
2, that's para and an ABA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're hoping with the increased rates, it might bring people in. We spent an hour and 20 minutes talking about data, which isn't exactly a flashy topic to discuss, but I think it was important for everyone to hear and see the work that the principals are doing and that teachers are doing. You know, we talked a lot about the common planning time. We're very fortunate to have an administrative staff and teachers who have dived into this data and embraced it and what it's telling us to help inform instruction and help our kids. So you can see we just hit, I think, our 5th week of school, correct? Maybe 6th? Or maybe 20th? But we're right there at about week 5 or 6. There's been a lot of work in these 5 weeks identifying the kids. So to be able to make sure that we're closing those gaps. So I'm really happy with the presentation. I know it was long, but thank you for doing that.
I'd really like to commend you all for your collaboration between the different schools as the kids transfer from one section to the other side. We know it's not easy, especially during the COVID year, so this is very paramount to everything that we do, is making sure that we get the kids what they need to have for services and support. So, thank you. Anybody else want to add anything?
Thank you for answering all my questions. And, Ms. Osha, you started off, and, Mr. Bell and Mr. O'Brien, you guys are right in the middle of it, and so that they can have a successful high school 4 years in preparation for college or wherever they go. So, I mean, I know it's no easy task, but thank you very much, and thank you for answering all my questions.
And thank you all. I hope we can find staff that'll make all these moving parts work together so you can all start moving forward and continue to move forward. And anybody, please?
We put it on the sign out front on the marquee. We put it in our newsletters. We've tweeted it out. We put it on Facebook. It's been tough.
It is.
It's been tough.
So thank you.
Why are you looking at me like I'm going to say something?
No, I'm not.
I never have a comment.
That's it for my report for tonight.
Okay. Thank you. So now we're moving to the school committee and subcommittee reports, the account payable. Do we have anything?
Yeah, there's a warrant.
Can I just read these? We have warrant 14 SCH 22 dated September 30th, 2021 for $31,322.05. Warrant 14 SCHL 22 dated 10/1/21. That was $69,6237. Warrant 13 SCHL 22. Warrant date is 9/24/21. And that total was $35,3222. And then warrant 13 SCH 22 9/23/21 was the warrant date. That amount was $142,136.28. Warrant 12 SCHL 22, warrant date 9/17/21. That's an interesting amount. It was 63 cents. And 11 SCHL 22, warrant date 9/10/21. That amount was $17,442.71. Finally, we have 11 SCH 22, warrant date on that was September 9th, 21. And that total was $162,630.82.
Thank you, Julie. All right. Nothing, now moving to the consent agenda, the selecting indicators for the superintendent's evaluation. We were supposed to go through and look at the rubrics and identify some areas where we want Dr. Vera to concentrate on for our goals, his goals for the year. Does anyone want to start off where, and we'll just go around and get everybody's input to figure out which one is really highlighted to all of us?
I can start.
Okay.
So, in thinking about this, I was just sort of keeping in mind, when Dr. Vera started off, he's been saying quite a few times, and that's resonated with me, is that he would like to see Douglas as a model district, and also, that there is no end to what we do. It's a process of continuous improvement, And so, those I wholeheartedly agree with. And so in choosing the selections that I have, it's in keeping with that vision in mind. So I picked for the standard 1, we talked about instruction at the last meeting, and my number 1 was student engagement. Standard 2 was a little bit more difficult. We talked about the environment, and I was focusing on social and emotional well-being, which I think we all have set a priority for our district this year. And that kind of goes with student health and safety, but I kind of singled out social and emotional well-being for this year. Standard 3, we chose the sharing responsibility indicator, and I selected both the student and family support. I think those are equally as important for student success. And for standard 4, we chose the continuous learning indicator, and under that I chose continuous learning of staff. Shared vision indicator was another one that we selected, and obviously there's only one there, so shared vision development was important to me. And managing conflict indicator was something we picked last meeting as well, and I picked consensus building. Curious to see what others thought.
Remind me how many of each we're trying to end up at, please.
I think I did 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You had 7. So I think we were in that 5 to 7, 5 to 8.
I eliminated half.
5 to 7, 5 to 8 is what we talked about.
Are we
doing.
supposed to hit each standard?
I think if you're asking me personally,
Yeah.
I think it's important to hit each.
Okay.
To hit each standard.
Okay.
They're each important for so many different reasons.
Yep.
So I think it's important to hit all 4.
All right. So I'll just talk. All right. So for standard 1, the most important to me was meeting diverse needs. And then I also liked, I know that we sort of talked about different stuff. I liked E1 as well, data-informed decision-making. So those were 2 that stuck out to me. Of course, I like student engagement and quality of effort and work too, but meeting diverse needs was my highlight there. In standard 2, I also like social and emotional well-being, but sort of based on the conversation tonight, which I think that we should take seriously, I was looking at student health and safety. I think that, we have fairly robust SEL in place, especially, I think that's something we do well, especially with COVID. So if I look at 11A4, sets high expectations for student behavior and establishes district-wide routines, policies, this is proficient, and systems that A, foster safe and supportive school environments, and B, prevent and address bullying or other unsafe behaviors, regularly checks for implicit bias in decision-making procedures, and provides training for administrators to uphold these expectations. Just based on what we've heard tonight, I feel like that's a weakness. So maybe that's something that we need to focus on a little bit more. I also had student support for standard 3. And my primary one in standard 4 was response to disagreement and conflict resolution, but I can also shared vision development and consensus building. They're all pretty related, so that's where I was at. So a little different than Monique and some overlaps as well. Oh, and the other one that we didn't really talk about, the fiscal systems indicator under standard 2. I liked how that's about clarifying why budget decisions are made the way that they are. I often feel that just the nature of what we do is kind of piecemeal, like, are we going to spend money on this? Are we going to cut this? And it kind of happens throughout the year. So beyond the budget subcommittee, I think it could be nice to have a better communication with the school committee and families, like why money is spent the way that it's spent. Those are the ones that, I know we can't do all of them, but those are my faves.
Well, I chose almost all the same ones, except the only difference I think maybe might be standard 4, because I like 1 and 2 on F.
Yep.
Both of them, but they kind of go hand in hand. So
Yeah.
I was like, is there any way to mesh them together to make one? Because I liked the part where we get everybody in a consensus, but then you're displaying it for the administrators and in number one, and passing it through this district. So that's a big one for me.
F1 was, I was trying to pick one or the other, because they do sound quite similar. So I could potentially go either way on that one.
But you could reverse engineer it either way, because you need one without the other.
Right.
Correct.
So, I mean,
I think
they
pick one
kind
will
of,
be
to me,
okay.
I was like, what would be a label that picks both? I thought consensus would be the end result of both of those, but, I agree with both.
Julie, do you have an opinion?
Sorry, I'm trying to get into, I'm struggling with this Gmail thing here. It just isn't working for me, so I'm trying to go off my memory here. I mean, everything that we've talked about, I don't have any issues with what other people are saying. I do still think that social and emotional well-being is a significant thing here. One of the things that I noticed here is over the past, too bad Josh left because I could speak more directly about it, but we've not done, back up. So to go to number 4, which was the environment, which is student health and safety, I think that also should include, if we're going to go that route, things that we've forgotten about, sadly, and that is actually the safety of the school. I don't see any buckets here. There's supposed to be buckets. I don't know where they are. I don't know if there is any, but, and I don't mean to raise that publicly, but.
Yeah, I don't think this room gets used that much.
Oh, okay.
It's only for this meetings, and I guess there's a little bit of students.
We just need to have some more trainings. And again, I want to be careful with what I say publicly, but if you can read between the lines, I think that it was lacking last year, and I know why, but we need to prepare the kids a little bit more in case of. That is a concern that we've kind of forgotten about, and I don't want it to be forgotten about. So to me, that's where I see more of a safety issue. Health, obviously, there's a lot of things that go on outside of school too as well, that kids do, and it's ramping up now with COVID behind us, but people being at home and people just, I think that's an area that we should focus on, but I also think that my thing too is also the social emotional well-being, because sometimes kids do hold things inside of them, or they're embarrassed, or they don't want to speak up, and I think we need to be a little bit more supportive of many issues going on here. And I agree with the financial part, and also with F. So I don't disagree with anything that anybody said. I would like to focus on both that social, emotional, and the student health and safety. And F, I do like 1 and 2 as well. And I'm not a big fan of standard 3. I don't know why, but I don't really have anything that stands out to me.
Standard 3 is fine, and I'm going to thank Beth for doing this. I sent her an email. Desi was partnering with an outside organization to try, we saw it last year, the importance of family and community engagement and partnerships. And Beth sent me a grant opportunity for schools to sign up and be a part of, and we were awarded that grant, so thank you for sharing that. And our first meeting is tomorrow. And what they're looking to do is, we saw firsthand last year why you need to engage parents. And engagement isn't us just sending a newsletter out. That's one-way communication. Engagement is that constant dialogue between school and home, home and school. So the way I understand this grant, what they're going to do is they're going to meet with us as a leadership team and talk a little bit about how we work and how we engage with families. Then they're going to go out into the community and do focus groups with community members to see, what would you like to see for more engagement and more communication and engagement between home and school. And then they're going to do the same thing with students and staff. And then from there, they're going to take that information based on what they do as a company and come up with a blueprint for us as to how here in Douglas we can better engage the community, because it's such a critical piece. We do so much communication, which is great, but the part that you're missing, and when you read a lot of the indicators and the rubric, it talks about that two-way communication. We do a great job pushing information out. We do it on Twitter, we do it on Facebook, we do it on newsletters, we do it on emails. But that push back in from the community and that engagement and that dialogue is something we need to work on. I think we heard that firsthand tonight with our kids. So it's tough because in many ways we do it, but we're not doing it to that next level, which is bringing the community and families in as partners. So I'm really excited for that opportunity.
Okay, so to all that, that's kind of what that's where I was going with that, and that's how I was thinking, because to your credit, if we're trying to get goals and all that stuff, I feel that you do it more successfully than any other administrator we've ever had that I've had experience with, in my personal opinion, of your communication. And the most important reason is because it's consistent. It's not like this week you're going to send out an email and then like maybe 5 weeks later you'll send out. You're very consistent, you're very detailed, and I think you do an excellent job with that, but I get the engagement part. The part that I feel is lacking is with the teachers. Last year was very difficult. I didn't know my son was doing bad in a class. I didn't feel that engagement with the teachers, because it's almost like you feel like you're bothering them and you're just a bother. That's kind of how I felt sometimes. So that's actually more my concern is from that level, but from your level, I'm just throwing it in there that I think you do a good job, but I'm all for engagement with families. So I do support that.
So that's part of, I feel like student support, here's where if you do Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFJ, so J is like, let's make a decision. But I like the B1 student support because it's pretty broad, and it says, like, for proficient, this is standard 3, B1 student support. Provides resources, professional development, and related supports to enable the identification of each student's academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs, including students with disabilities and English learners, supports administrators to collaborate with families to address student needs, utilizing resources within and outside of the district. I feel like that covers all of what we're saying here. It is SEL, and it is specific learning, and it is engagement with the family, and it is guiding the district admins, and I would hope trickle-down staff to interact.
I do like that one. The only thing I think of is it doesn't bring like the family to the forefront, which I think is important, to really single that out, because, learning just doesn't happen in the school system. It happens when they go home too, for them to be successful in the school a lot of times. So I think, I think that family specifically is an important one.
Oh, and one of the other things too is standard 4 on the commitment to high standards. So years ago, like, that was also a struggle, was our school was like here, and we wanted to get here. And now I feel like now we're down here, and now we're just gonna try to get here. And I think to your comment that Dr. Vera wants us to be like the model thing, I almost feel like that might be the way, but.
Well, I had looked at that, and that was an important one too, but I think that the last meeting, we sort of tried to narrow our focus even more, and that's why, we had picked certain indicators to look at that meeting, and so I think that's kind of what the work that we were doing since last meeting to now, is looking at those narrowed down indicators, because it is so broad. And we have one, we have this one school year, and, we have one superintendent to try to steer the ship for how we're going to spend the school year. So I think, like, last meeting, we narrowed focus, and so what we were going to do is narrow focus further. So I think that's kind of the goal of what we're trying to do.
I'll offer this as a suggestion. When you read, you have the indicators, and underneath the indicators, you have the elements. When you read the elements, they're kind of so closely intertwined and interchangeable that if you're looking at, like you said, student support, if you have a kid struggling, you're going to have to reach out to the family. And if a family feels like a student struggling, they're going to reach out to the school to support it. So they're kind of intertwined together. And I think I know I'm fortunate to have a committee that values all of this, but also understands that there's 36 weeks in a school year, and there's only so much that can be done with time and resources. So instead of picking the elements, why don't we stick to 5 or 6 indicators, and then we'll kind of encapsulate or use the elements underneath those and blend them together. So instead of trying to figure out, do we go with 3B1 or 3B2? Let's just call it 3B, the shared responsibility. And because it's so closely blended together, we'll have both the family and the student support blended together, as opposed to trying to decide, because we could be here for days doing that. So let's just, that would be my suggestion, just to pick 5 or 6 indicators, and I can blend them together, if that's amenable.
So do we have like a standard one that we all agree on, or that we want to
So-
support?
I think we agree on several.
I think we agree on-
I think we have
agree
a
on-
meeting of the minds on a priority of, I believe it's on the standard one, because again, I have to keep track of this, so
Right.
when we do reporting. So, for standard one, it's instruction indicators.
Yep.
So that's the B.
1B.
I believe for standard 2, it's the environment.
Yep.
For standard 3, I believe we have consensus on sharing responsibility indicator.
Yep.
The one that is on standard 4 is where I believe we have some agreements, disagreements. I think it's kind of like,
But you can have more than just one per each. You said like 7.
but to
But
give
he's
him
picking
a,
from the subcategories.
yeah, so I mean, it's just
I think on that one, we were mostly on managing conflict indicator.
correct, because I think if you do that, you are already doing the shared vision indicator, because what comes out of this year will be the basis we build for next year, like where is our focus, what did we hit, what did we not hit? And that'll help shape what we want Dr. Vera to focus on. But this is just the baseline of where we're going for the year. I think if we overwhelm it too much, there's, like I said, we're already halfway through. I would like to, for next year, do a summer retreat where we sit down and look at this, do a deep dive in, what did we do well, what do we think? If we can get involvement from the community for feedback on how we're doing, what do they need, you know, I think we heard this evening. So it's that collaboration, like how do we brainstorm and bring all of these people in the community, the administrators, you know, the teachers, the parents, everybody together to be collaborative so they understand how we set our goals.
If you look at, like you said, 4F, if you're building consensus among people, you have to be managing conflict.
Right.
So I just went and I read proficient example. So if you're building consensus, as part of building consensus towards a project, towards a mission, you're dealing obviously with some form of conflict, and you have to manage that. So the two are,
Okay, so I'm okay with switching around then. I'm gonna start in with consensus. So that's good. I agree with that. I'll get rid of my idea and I'll go with the groups.
Because I think if we manage this well, then I think for next year, we can focus more on the fiscal stuff of it. And it just like, it gives the building blocks, like where we should be focusing versus like we're re-injuring it right now and we're like a quarter of a way through.
I think we're all in consensus with that.
So,
progress reports have gone out. So if you think of your old high school terms, there are 4 terms. We're halfway through term 1. So we're 1/8 of the way through the school year already.
So I think that, and I think that's something that you're already starting to do, Dr. Vera, is with the continuous learning of staff. If we want to see change and a positive change, you know, we have to help give our staff the tools to be able to do that so that they're not stressed about it, they're happy to do it. It's an exciting time for them to learn and to learn how to, you know, best serve individual students. So I think the learning piece is huge for them to
Correct.
feel comfortable with change.
And if you heard Cindy and John talk about the 2 to 3 year plan we have with literacy, that's going on, that's very exciting. John and Bob talked about their common planning time where teachers are meeting once a day to talk about instruction, talk about teaching and learning, look at the kids. So we're trying to build it. And one of the things we talked about today in our leadership team meeting was, and this is common throughout the United States, a lot of times when districts do professional development, someone comes in, they're there once for 4 hours, and then they're gone. And then if you weren't there for that PD or you have follow-up questions, it's really difficult to do. So having Claire here for 3 years is fantastic. The PD here with Star, that they're going to come back and meet with people, is fantastic. The common planning time, which is happening at the middle school every day, and I think the elementary school once a week. It's happening on a continuous basis, so you can continue to have that professional development and create those learning communities with teachers, as opposed to having that person who comes in once, does what they does their 4-hour PD, and then leaves, and teachers are excited, but then when they have a follow-up question, they're in the dark, or you have to pay $2,000 for the person to come back, So it's difficult.
Well, even Mrs. Socha said, when they started to use the STAR, there was a lot of anxiety around it, and then they learned it, they saw it, how it worked, and now there's seems to be some comfort level around it, and they're eager to use it more. So that's what I want to. I would love to see more of that and see that momentum continue, because I think that serves everybody the best.
So if I'm hearing correctly, it was 1B, 2A, 3B, and 4F.
Yes.
And there's no battleship references here. I had to, it was too easy.
Oh, that's right up my alley.
We all got it.
You all got it? All right, perfect. All right. So I'll work on my goals. I'll try to have them for the next meeting in October. It might be the first meeting in November.
Great job. Okay, can we review the September 15th, 2020 meeting minutes? There's nothing out of the ordinary. Are you looking for a motion?
Make a motion to approve the September 15th, 2021 school committee meeting minutes.
Motion made by Lisa, second by Julie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next thing is establish the after-school enrichment program at the middle school. Mr. O'Brien, we kept you here just for this? Thank you for staying.
First, I'd like to thank Courtney Keegan for all her help with getting this onto the agenda. Thank you very much. As we heard throughout this meeting, it's important for students to have a place where they feel they belong, that there's at least one adult that they trust, that they can go to with anything. I think we're a lot like the fire department. And if your house catches on fire in the kitchen and you don't call us, we can't put it out. And if you fail to call us and the whole house goes up in flames, then it's all a loss. So it's really important that students know that they can come and trust at least one adult, hopefully more, in the building. And that's where these after-school programs pay such dividends. Just today, I had 3 students come up and said, can we have a baking group after school? We want to bake and decorate and cook. And we do have a kitchen at the school. And I said, that's great. I'm talking to the school committee tonight. There's a huge desire, and I would like to fulfill that by really making the middle school, which is usually the toughest time in school for kids, a great opportunity for them to be with their friends, interact, get out of their comfort zone of their own peer group, make new friends, and go forward so they can look back and say, that was, it's tough, but that was really rewarding. So we really want to create this atmosphere where the school day does not end at 2 o'clock, that it goes, and the middle school is a hub for the community, for these students to do something. They don't have their driver's license yet, mom and dad are at work, and the most dangerous time for students is between 3 and 7. So having them have an opportunity to be at school, it would just pay huge dividends, no risk to the general budget. So some of the after-school enrichments that we already have, Megan Miller and Ms. Auger mock trial. What they will do is they partner with some attorneys, and they will come in, they'll talk about the Constitution, talk about freedom of speech, give these students a chance to cross-examine a witness, and at the end of it, the culminating experience is actually doing a mock trial, but they learn all those skills. And that pulls in students from all different backgrounds for that. An art club, an art enrichment.
You're learning.
Real quick, MGL. We have a teacher ready to go, but these opportunities and how it's written in that language If we find a need and students have the desire to do it, then we can fulfill these after-school enrichment programs. Correct me if I'm wrong, as they come up. So what might be popular this year, we might have to be able to do an after-school baking enrichment. That might be something different. I worked at a school once where a substitute teacher did a crochet group. Over 24 kids showed up to crochet, and it was such a mishmash of personalities. It was great. So that's the type of excitement and community belonging I'd like to bring to the middle school.
I just want to say something about the baking club. I love this idea. I've been pushing for this for years and years. But I'm like, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, the kitchen is going to be like tainted because they probably have to use like certain cleaners and stuff like that. So I don't know how well that's going to go, but maybe they can use like the high school. There's like a food services thing, but that's not even on the agenda. But I was just thinking, that's the first thing that came to my mind was
Yeah,
if there was going to be a serve safe issue or something like that. Or
Absolutely, yeah.
But again, we can think about that when it comes to that, but there's
All of
ways
those
around
things, but it was just that, it struck me as quite a coincidence that they came up today, they searched me out and said, we want to do it, and then all three emailed me saying, can we do this? They wanted to bake today, and I said, it takes a little while. But those are the things that we would like to pursue at the middle school, and we have a great model in the elementary school and how they started it.
Yep.
So now as students come up, they're expecting some more things to happen.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question. I love anything that says that it's self-funded. My question is, would there be any way for, sorry, I'm tired. Is there any way for Douglas families to sponsor some of this? Because even $50 per class is a lot for some families, and oftentimes, like, those are kids who need the outlets. Is there a financial option for doing that specifically where we could either fundraise or if there's I hate the idea of a kid not saying that they want to sign up because they can't afford it.
Well, definitely, there are options for people to make donations. Of course, you just want to be careful because you want to make sure that it's, kind of an allowed kind of a thing. And then if somebody wants to give a donation, we always require that they send along a letter dictating, specifying how they want it spent specifically. So usually people call in advance to find that out, just so that it doesn't go awry, because sometimes we've had to actually return money because it just wasn't.
Okay.
Or sometimes what's happened, actually in every single place I've worked in, you are not allowed to ever touch the money because the process wasn't followed correctly, and the town accountant can't allow it to be spent because it doesn't say
Okay.
what it can be spent on. So, yeah, as long as,
And the schools
and we
not-
do get donations. We've had donations for,
Yeah.
various things,
For, yeah,
miscellaneous
the
things,
library, I
athletics,
remember.
PTO could probably help out with
music,
things like that too.
things of that nature.
But Douglas, the
But-
elementary school one has a scholarship program right now that it actually says it on that
Yeah.
application.
Okay, so then that would be great to make sure that we include in the paperwork or the way that it's
Absolutely.
set up, because, yeah, I would want as many kids as can access it to be able to.
Okay, so I move to approve the establishment of a middle school after-school enrichment program pursuant to the Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 47. The program will not run if there is not sufficient interest in funding to be self-funded to pay for stipends, supplies, and other related expenditures. The fee per class will be $50 per student per class per session. The teacher stipend amount per class will be $362, and the coordinator stipend amount, if needed, will be $2,922 pending DTA approval. The stipend amounts will be updated for fiscal year 2022, if applicable, pending DTA negotiations.
A little wordy, but second covers everything.
Motion made by Julie, second by Lisa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Are you gonna do the taste testing?
I will bring it to the school. World's best baker or whatever.
Yep.
What emergency show is.
Next is the stipend for school nurses.
So, you've heard me say it on numerous occasions, how wonderful and fantastic the nurses have been throughout the pandemic. One thing that a lot of people don't know about is COVID just doesn't happen between 7 a.m. and 2 p.m. during the school day. So a lot of times, the principals will find out that someone tests positive at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, or on a Saturday or a Sunday, and they're reaching out to the nurses for help. How long does this person need to quarantine for? What do they need to do? The parents have this question, the parents have that question. And the nurses did that last year, at nights, at weekends, over Christmas vacation, over February vacation, over April vacation. What some school districts have started to do is create a stipend for the nurses as a token of monetizing their work that's happening outside the contract day. So what we're proposing is a $2,000 stipend, which would be grant funded just for the 21-22 school year. It would come out of our ESSER 3 grant. It'd be a $2,000 stipend for the 5 nurses to compensate them for the work that they're doing at night and on weekends as a result of COVID. I think it's just important to point out, everyone is doing work in the district outside of school hours at night and weekends, but it's so critically important when we get that call at 8 o'clock at night from a parent that says, my kid's positive, and Josh is calling Mel G to say, I need help contact tracing. They're dropping everything at 8 o'clock to make sure that the schools, kids, families, and staff are safe. So we thought about creating this stipend for them at $2,000 for their work that's happening beyond the school day. And it's grant funded. There is as Courtney said, our eyes read what we want them to read. So if you look at the motion, it should say 21-22 and 21-22, not the 20-20, that was last year. So any questions on that?
So I move to approve a stipend for nurses in the amount of $2,000 for their after-hours work associated with COVID for the 2021 to 2022 school year. This approval expires at the end of the 2021
To 2022.
2022
Correct.
school year.
Second?
Is this a $2,000 for each nurse?
Correct. And if you look at our stipends, what I base it off of, if you look at our Appendix C, I base it off of what a lot of our most active clubs and clubs are doing at the high school, where teachers are meeting with kids multiple times a week, doing a variety of events. That's where I came up with that. So I base it on our most active clubs at the high school.
Any other further questions, clarifications? Motion made by
Julie.
Julie, I'm sorry, it's been a long night.
Yeah.
Second by Lisa, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you.
The bus monitor, Ms. Soboleski couldn't be here today, so Courtney is going to speak a little bit about the bus monitor position.
So currently the district contracts with Telstone for 2 specialized transportation buses, and they do both runs, the DES run and the DMS DHS run, in the morning and the afternoon, and there's also a midday run as well. Typically, it's an hour, back and forth for the regular run, half hour for the preschool. Historically, we have been able to find, for the numbers of bus monitors that we've needed for a number of years, either paras or ABAs that are interested, they've got the time, and they've been paid their regular hourly rate. And we've never had a problem until, of course, this year. So kind of a long theme we were talking about earlier, trying to find people and things of that nature. So they are required, the bus monitors are required on each route. So what we've done is, well, first let me back up a little bit. We are looking to incorporate in the contract the ability to still do what we've been doing. So if the need is there and they're interested, we certainly have the ability to point them. But we also wanted to create, and a number of districts do have this, we never needed it, a bus monitor position separate that we would actually post, outside as additional avenue to make sure that we have an adequate number of bus monitors for the routes. So the current paraprofessionals, ABAs, now this is at the current rates, with $13.02 to $22.54 hour, on average, to maintain the compliance with bus monitors on specialized transportation ranges between $17 and $18 an hour, depending on the staff member serving as a monitor for that day. And it's just on an as-needed basis. There are a total of 22.5 hours per week currently that require the district to compensate bus monitors. The creation of a bus monitor position within the district will allow us to post, as I stated, for the specific position, and hopefully get consistent monitors each day and reduce the number of administrators that have been actually riding the bus this year. They have had to do that a number of times, almost daily. I believe it has been pretty much daily lately. So the financial impact won't be any different. Actually, the rate that we're recommending is $15 per hour, which is a little bit less for the outside posted position. And we did provide a job description as well for it. I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at that as well. Just so that we covered, as we talked about, we're trying to get those done as well this year, in addition to many other things, but this one will at least be one that we would have done. I didn't know if you had any questions on the process or anything, or the job description.
So there's just one, how many bus monitors are we trying to hire?
Oh, it all depends on the
As
number of
needed.
students. I mean, we do currently have some ABAs and paras that are currently doing it. It's just that we're short.
Yeah.
And they've tried and tried and tried.
I will
we've
say
done
I live
everything.
the furthest from the school and always had a bus monitor. And
Yeah.
So they have to get up and be at the school at
Yeah.
5:40. Because they were at my house at 6:10. So I can see why.
It used to be a,
Yeah, sometimes
it was my understanding, it was a coveted position that people, you had your 4 or 5 people who did it,
Yeah.
and then yours, I hear you're about to retire, is it true, is it not? Because people want, this year, we're really struggling to have people, like you said, get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be here at 5:30 for that run. Obviously, people would go, if we are hiring people from the outside, we would train them, we would work with them, they would be quarried, so
Yes.
that goes without saying, but I just wanted to mention that too. But this just gives us the ability that if we can't find the staff internally to do it, to at least give us an opportunity to post outside to see if anyone's interested in being a bus monitor.
So I move to approve the position of bus monitor and the proposed job description. The hourly rate for fiscal year 2022 will be $15 per hour. The days and hours per school day will be on an as-needed basis.
Motion made by Julie, second by Lisa. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Next is the first reading of the JKAA, Prevention of Physical Restraints and Requirements if Used.
So it's not in here. So here's, we put it on the agenda because it was all set from, Ms. Soboleski was working with Mike Joyce, our attorney, and it was all set to go. About 2 days ago, he noticed a couple of things that were missing from it, and he said, hold off until I can update it, so we're just going to hold off on the first reading until Tara and Michael can look at it and make sure that it's accurate, so.
And the first reading of the BDH, Public Participation of School Committee Meeting.
Sure, so let me go through this. So you'll see in your packet a new policy, or revised policy on public participation at school committee meetings. The policy subcommittee meeting met twice. Myself, Mrs. Keegan, Mrs. Charniak, and Mrs. Mulder met on 2 separate occasions for about 2.5 hours each time to look at our current policy, look at policies from other districts, and take some input from our school attorney as to how we can relook and revise this policy. So what you see here is the culmination of about 6-7 hours worth of work from our team, and then the lens of our attorney looking at it to make sure that it is legal. So let me just walk through with you. The first 2 paragraphs remain the same as we've had in our other policy. The 3rd paragraph speaks to public speak, and I'll just read it for those of you who are still up and watching at home. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It is an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority to ensure compliance with the open meeting law, privacy laws, and other legal obligations. The committee will not engage with the speaker or with one another in deliberation on comments as they are presented during public comment. At its discretion, the committee may schedule issues raised by the speaker for deliberation at a future meeting. So it just clearly spells out why we don't engage in discussion and debate. The next paragraph, again, I'll read it. Pursuant to MGL Section, Chapter 30A, Section 20G, no person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceedings of a meeting of a public body. If after a clear warning from the chair, a person continues to disrupt the proceedings, the chair may order the person to withdraw from the meeting, and if the person does not withdraw, the chair may authorize a constable or other officer to remove the person from the meeting. It comes straight from Mass General Law. So to translate this is, it gives the chair the ability to recognize a person. A person can only speak if they're recognized by the chair. The chair does have the legal ability to say, I'm sorry, you need to quiet down, I'm sorry, you can't. And if that person doesn't follow the direction, we have the legal ability to remove them from a meeting.
I'm wondering if we should put that in quotations and/or italics so that it's clear, like if somebody's looking at it, it's clear that this is Mass General Law. This is not like something that we created as policy.
And that's why we do 3 readings.
Exactly.
I could do that, absolutely. The next thing is the following the rules and procedures are adopted. In our previous policy, we had 12. We kind of melded that down to 5. So the first one speaks to, at a regularly scheduled school committee meeting, you have the ability for public comment. The length of public comment is typically 20 minutes. However, at the discretion of the chair, that time may be adjusted. So if we're having a discussion where, like we did last year on COVID or masks or coming back to school, you might want to adjust that upwards or downwards. So, but typically it's 20 minutes, and that just spells out the length of public speak. Number 2 talks about speakers are permitted to address the chair only when speaking. So everything has to go through the chair. Each speaker will be allotted up to 3 minutes to present. They must start by stating their name, address, and town. The chair may permit an extension of time at their discretion. So again, depending on the situation, we can increase or in some situations decrease the time. And then, as we saw tonight, the chair may favor, in no particular order, speakers who are parents, guardians, students, residents, or in some circumstances, employees or out-of-town people. So again, if we know we only have 20 minutes and we want to make sure we have a certain group heard first, the chair has the discretion to do that.
Sorry, could I just add to, with the permitting extension of the time limit at their discretion, what we had sort of talked about was, like, if somebody's in the middle of a sentence, either, if we're going to do drop dead at 3 minutes, we'd have to do drop dead at 3 minutes for everybody. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
So
that's why we're doing the hand wave at 30 seconds so they understand. I think it should be, though, and I just want consensus, that I think we always want to hear from the students first.
I have no problem with that.
I think that just so that they understand that that's really what we're here for. It starts there. And then if they don't get satisfaction, maybe they'll get their parents to come. I mean, not that that's what I'm looking for, but I think that's really where we should be focusing, just based on what we've heard this evening. I think it's paramount that we make sure that the students are heard first before the adults take over, where our focus is with them versus, and it's part of our mission, is we are hearing them
kids.
and we're reflecting on that, so.
One thing I'm wondering is, so you said we can drop down the time limit for public comment. I mean, can we give consideration to that if we have a lot of things on the agenda?
And that's why it's there, that's what we talked about, that's why it's there at the chair's discretion. So if you know you're having a lengthy agenda, and you want to, and you can only do 20 minutes of public comment, and you look out and you know that 30 people want to speak, you might say, due to the fact we only have 20 minutes for public comment tonight, and it looks like there are a lot of people here, we're going to limit public comment to 2 minutes or 90 seconds per person. So it allows you to do that, but on the flip side, if you might want to allow for 4 minutes in some circumstances. So it gives the chair the ability.
Well, I mean, can we say we're only going to do 10 minutes of public comment?
Yeah, that's why it says.
That's why it says at the
may be
discretion of the chair,
adjusted.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
And whoever gets to speak in that time is it, and then we're done? Okay.
correct.
Right, and so I think that would be we'd have to have that beforehand to know how big the agenda is.
Correct.
I would look to you, Dr. Vera and Courtney, to say, hey, just so you know, it's a packed agenda because this took an hour. This is very important, don't get me wrong, but.
And the data.
Yep.
And the public comment was
Right.
all
So-
long tonight.
For instance, what a couple school districts did this year at the start of the school year, when talking about masks and back to school, what they did is they actually scheduled 2 school committee meetings. They did one on Tuesday for the sole purpose of public comment. And then they had their regularly scheduled school committee meeting on Wednesday where they did not hear public comment, and they just went through their agenda. So for that school committee meeting, they scheduled 2 hours for public comment for the length of their school committee meeting to make sure anyone who wanted to speak could speak. And then they had their regular scheduled school committee meeting the next day, but didn't have public comment on it. So this, again, this gives the chair, based on the topic or what's going on, the ability to increase or decrease the length of public comment. Number 3, again, talks about what can be discussed at public comment. It's topics that are on the agenda and within the purview of the school committee. And the purview of the school committee is budget, policy, and the superintendent. So if you can trace it to something that's on the agenda that night that you want to speak to, and if it's something within the school committee's purview, which is policy, budget, or the superintendent, that all fits under the public speak umbrella. In educational goals, which is policy and budget. Yeah, correct.
Another editorial question.
Where is it?
And or? Topics raised, limited to items that are within the school committee's authority and that are on that day's agenda? Or do we need to say or that are on that day's agenda? Does it have to be both? Because if it's and, it has to be on the agenda. So like,
Well, do you remember how when we were working with Greg and he said there was one piece that was bolded?
yeah,
That and that are on the day's agenda was what he bolded. And
that's what he changed?
that's what he added to it, yeah.
So then it has to be on the agenda to be discussed at all during public comment?
So if there's something on, if someone comes, for instance, we can use this policy as an example.
Yeah.
Someone could come to public speak and say, I want to speak specifically to, and again, policy is what the school committee is about, but here on BEDH, public participation. So it's on the agenda, so someone can speak to it about it. There's sometimes things on the agenda that aren't within policy or budget
Right.
that are put on the agenda, and that can be a part of public comment.
Yeah, I
But you
agree
hear
with
what
you,
I'm
Becky.
saying,
I think that we should ask about this again.
I think we should.
Okay, I'll clarify with Greg.
Because I hear what you're saying, that it could be
Yeah.
on the agenda, but not something that public comment is appropriate to discuss.
Okay.
However, if it's not on the agenda, but it is within our authority,
Right.
we're gonna say that you can't talk about it?
Yeah, I
You know what I'm
think
saying?
we should look into it.
Let me double check with Greg. He added it, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Good.
Again,
Like
why we,
if they have a golf meet, then somebody can't come up and start talking about like the latest PGA tours that they're having or something like that.
understood.
Right, well, that's not under the authority, but
Yeah.
this is different. So like tonight's discussion, for example, we needed that, right? I don't want students to have to make a stretch and say like, oh, well, I read this superintendent evaluation document, and inside of there it says health and safety, so now I want to talk about my health and safety, and like, that's ridiculous. They should be able to talk about that because it is under the scope of our authority, even if it's not on the agenda. We want to talk about LGBTQ and like school climate. Do you know what I'm saying?
Makes perfect sense. I'll talk to
Yeah,
Greg
definitely
tomorrow.
wanna look into that. That was a good catch, actually, yeah. I didn't see that at all.
Again, I see what you want them to see.
Yeah, that's true.
Number 4 speaks to the fact that this form of public comment is not the place to bring up complaints, issues, or concerns with faculty members. Administrative channels are the proper way to do that. So if a parent has an issue with a teacher or a principal or paraprofessional or an ABA, the proper channels to do that is through the administrative channels and not through public speak. And then the last piece really condenses, and we spent a lot of time working on this verbiage, was the chair of the meeting, after a warning, reserves the right to end a person's privilege of address if the speaker is deemed to be using threatening language, breaching the peace, inciting lawless conduct, or using obscenities. And that kind of really made it a little more succinct as to what can and can't be. There was some language in the previous, but what's constitutionally protected, and after we talked about it, and we talked to Greg, there is no way that anyone on the fly is going to know what's constitutionally protected and what isn't protected based off of the thousands of laws.
Yeah, there's probably enough case law on that to fill this entire room.
So again, we tried to make it a little more succinct. And again, the reason there are 3 readings for all policies is for this reason, because once you have your 3rd read, it becomes your policy and what you abide by. So you want to make sure we have the time to have the 3 readings, to look at it, digest it, process it, and then come back and speak at it 2 more times.
So can school committee address questions that are brought up during that time?
During public speak?
Yeah, and if we can't answer questions, how are those answers given to those people with questions?
Well, typically what I've seen in 26 years of many meetings is typically the chair will say, thank you, sir, we will take that under advisement. And then, and if it is an issue of, and I know where you're going, certainly if it's something that is concerning or whatever, so you want to allow the chance, for several reasons, take it under advisement. That way you have the chance to actually research things, understand, the issue or speak to.
Like, I'm using, let's
and
look
then
at
address it at a future meeting.
masks, for instance, right? So we had a lot of people who had comments during that meeting and during public comment regarding masks. And I feel like we owed them some response because or they should have a response to their concerns regarding masks. And how does that happen?
But we did respond to them.
We did that day, but can we do that?
Technically, you're not supposed to respond during public
That's
comment
the key.
because
That's the key.
it could be seen as a violation of open meeting law. So the way it's been explained is, let's say someone comes, and I'll use just a completely different example. Let's say someone comes to talk about how they feel that there's too much money going to athletics in the school department and more money should be going towards remediation support. And someone speaks to that at public comment. And then the school committee engages in debate or discussion about that. And at the next meeting, or at that meeting, we're deciding to potentially eliminate sports. You're now talking about an agenda item, you're now talking about a topic that's not on the agenda, and you haven't given the public the ability to come in and be present for that meeting. So if someone brings up a concern like that, and if you look at the third paragraph, it says, at its discretion, the committee may schedule issues raised by the speaker for deliberation at a future meeting. So if someone brought up, for instance, issues about, let's use masks, you might, through the chair, because it's the chair and the vice chair that create the agenda, you might put under superintendent's report or under consent agenda, or under new business, discussion on masks within the Douglas Public Schools. And at the next meeting, discuss that.
Okay.
But also I feel.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I also feel in this particular instance that you're asking about, because you're talking about things that are very current, very relevant, and very all the time there. So that's why you do have, old business, new business, and also anything that is something of, ongoing concern. Typically, the superintendent, as he has, usually has it under a superintendent's report. You have the ability, COVID-19 updates. You could utilize some of those avenues in which to input, because remember, it's always your meeting. And so at that time, you could address it, but you're not addressing it directly to public comment or to a specific speaker. You would be addressing it generally speaking. So that way you get to your point, Monique, as well, of addressing it as a school committee.
Yeah, a few years ago, I think there was some really controversial things that would come up, and that created some issues. In fact, I think there was even some DTA things that came up that they would use that opportunity to kind of talk. And there was not, you couldn't do that two-way conversation.
Right. It's not meant to be negotiations or,
Yeah.
and this is
But
just.
it was used in that sort of
Right.
way almost.
Right.
So.
And the moment that we, Lisa says, that's a good point. I do think we're spending too much money on athletics and we should blah, blah, blah. And then the second I say, well, I don't know, Lisa, now we are deliberating. And this is why I don't like the procedural, but the law is the law and we have to tighten up in terms of our procedure. It's pretty clear. I'm lax, but public comment is meant to be just expression of opinions that have to do with the school. And it's for the chair to say, start, stop, the end. And then any of our thinking about it, any of our discussing it, it has to be on the agenda. Same reason why we can't easily pick out 7 indicators because we're not allowed to message each other and say, how do you feel about this one, Monique? Like, we're not allowed to.
It's very frustrating.
It is frustrating.
And the reason that all public meetings need to be posted 48 hours prior with an agenda is to give the community the ability to say what's going to happen at the school committee meeting and look and read and say, oh my goodness, they're speaking about X. I should be present at the meeting. So if someone's like, I didn't know you were thinking about doing A, B, and C, we can say, well, look, it was posted on our September 15th meeting we talked about. It was posted again and we discussed it at our September 30th meeting, and then we decide to vote again, and we decide to vote on it in our October 12th meeting. You can show that pattern, that it was posted, notice was given. It's not our fault that you didn't read or go to the posting. So if you start having a discussion about something that's not in the agenda, and then deliberating, you run the risk of violating open meeting law.
And that's why under a lot of municipal laws, they have required public hearings. As you know, we have a required, school committees have a required public hearing for the budget. And that's for that very purpose, because it's the budget. That's their opportunity to come and ask questions and make statements and get answers, and we give presentations. I mean, there's a clear distinction between a meeting of a board of committee, which is to do your business, and a public hearing that's required, is so that you can get to those types of things.
So make those edits. We'll do the same process again in 2 weeks, and then again in a month.
I know it's late, but I am going to say just a few things, believe it or not. Okay? Now, I just want to, only because there seems to be a recurring theme, I just want to kind of update on business and operations with the school. So, and I'll be very quick. With regard to transportation, things are going very well. Knock on wood. I guess it's right here. We have a full, we have all the bus drivers that we need. I mean, occasionally the manager does have to drive. They have been able to obtain and train new drivers to at least have a listing of people. We're one of the few bus companies that have it that good, if you've been watching, watching the news and listening to the newspapers. So let's just hope that continues. Everything's been going very well. School lunch, there has been an issue with food deliveries and things of that nature. Of course, again, never happened before in the history of anything I can ever think of. Maybe back in the Depression, and I wasn't here.
Can I comment to that really quick? I asked my daughter, I said, is there anything that I should bring up tonight, if you could think of anything? And that was her one comment, is she did say there's some issues with the food. So is that maybe what would be going on in high school?
Food deliveries.
What grade is she in?
It's a high school. I don't know what that meant. She just said that's something to discuss, so I don't know what that means, but.
No, actually, we feel, that we have a new food service director, and she's been doing a fabulous job. In fact, at the high school, she actually did a survey and worked with the high school principal to find out foods that kids might like. So she has been doing a lot of great stuff, improved and increased the breakfast program at all of the buildings. She's done so much since she's been here, which has only been a very short
So
period
the
of time.
supply isn't the issue?
Pretty phenomenal.
So the supply is the issue?
Yes,
or it's not?
supply, yes.
Okay, so that's probably what the issue is.
Getting the food. So there will,
And
there
or
have.
having the drivers
Yes.
to drive the food from
Yes.
point A to point B.
Yeah, last week she actually had to drive all the way down to Taunton to pick up food. So, and we've had to do a few other things too. So just to let you know that, she's doing the absolute best that she can under the circumstances that she has. She's been doing a phenomenal job. Great communication with all the principals, working with the principals, the breakfast program. There's so many things. She signed up with a farm to school program. Then there's the Adopt a Cow program. She's really doing, for someone who just started, she's got some phenomenal things going on. I feel really bad for her she's so many great things, and then I kind of thought it was going to happen, but I was doing this, and then I started getting all the emails as well as she. So she's doing, again, thank God, she's got a lot of great experience, so she's doing the best she can with it. Custodial, again, just to reiterate, just trying to find custodians, and also subs. So if you know of anyone at all, please send them our way. And I did upload the end of the year report today, yay. So that's done, so we can move on to a whole bunch of other things that need to get done.
Correct.
So that's it. No transfers and reclasses, haven't had time, but we will get caught up on those. And we also, one other thing, I know he wants me to stop talking.
No,
but I have-
you're like, one other thing, go ahead.
We really should have a budget subcommittee soon as well. So as soon as we get all of the encumbrances for salaries in, you have a really good idea for the FY '22, we will sit down on budget subcommittee, and then I'll do a presentation to the full committee where we stand with general fund and all of our other grants and revolving funds as well.
Just to give Courtney kudos, the budget subcommittee was something I had on my calendar to talk to her about this week, but she's been under the gun to get the end of the year report in, and one thing she came to see me, she's like, can I please just have 2 days of uninterrupted time to write this report? I think it was 3 or 4 days. So she did a lot of work the past week and a half to get the end of the year report in on time. So now that that's done, that's settled, we can start looking at some
Bunch of other things.
some budget
Many.
for
That
FY
would really
'23.
put you to work, Courtney.
Some FY '23 budget things.
So that's it. So we'll all keep our fingers crossed that all these COVID things go away in a couple weeks, just like this.
Thanks, Courtney.
And that's
Topics not anticipated. I know we talked briefly about moving the school committee meeting because of your date. Do we want to
So
discuss that? I figure we can throw it out there.
So the first meeting in December, I am away at a conference. It is the December 1st school committee meeting. So what I mentioned to the chair was we could do a couple things. We could do it on the 30th and have 3 meetings in November, even though it's just a day off, or not have a meeting on Wednesday the 1st and just do everything on the 15th.
When is Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving is
Week prior.
the 24th.
There's not a lot of stuff goes on between those 2 weeks anyway.
Oh, good.
Nobody's even in school practically.
So we have a meeting on the 3rd and then the 17th. And then you basically have 4 or 5 days of school before the meeting of the 1st. So again, there's the regular running of the school and the warrants and everything.
I just don't want to see there be a jam-packed agenda for December. So that's my only concern.
When are you around the following week, like the 6th through 10th?
I'm around the 6th or the 10th.
Okay. Well, so what if we were to cancel it, but then if we recognize after the 17th that the load is getting bigger or we're having
We could-
COVID problems or whatever,
Yeah.
we could maybe switch it to the 8th.
That could work.
And
That
then
would
if we
work.
need another one before winter break, we would have some days to play with.
Okay. So cancel the one for the 1st, but if needed, hold the December 8th
Yeah,
date.
keep an eye on it.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
so we don't have a 4-hour meeting like tonight.
We're going to hold December 8th, yeah.
The nice thing is that the chair creates the agenda, so if it gets too long, we can adjust.
Call me.
Crucial
Well,
things,
you didn't know
It's all
it would
on
be that
Heather.
long.
crucial things before the new year, that's it.
So, okay, and then we are going to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing contract negotiations. The school committee will not return to open session afterwards. So I thank you all for
We
staying.
need a roll call vote.
Yeah, we need a roll call, but I thank you all. Roll call vote to adjourn at, oh, that's wrong clock.
9:56?
9:56 on October 6th.
Julie
Becky
Mulder.
Charnier, oh,
Go ahead.
Becky Charnier, okay.
Lisa Brown, aye.
Monique Salvis, aye.
Julie Mulder.
Heather Moore and I. Thank you all.